a couple minutes late. My apologies, that was my fault. Thank you for coming, those of you that are here. We'll start off with an invocation by our librarian, Donna Carden. Thank you for being willing to do that for us. Amen. Okay, and Ed Norton will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, we start our meeting off with unscheduled public appearances. That is for any item, if you want to discuss any item that is not on the agenda as a public hearing. We have two public hearings. One is the adoption of the tentative budget, and the other is a purchase agreement with WPI. So if any of you would like to make comments about anything else that's on the agenda, please come forward. And I believe, I don't know your name, but when you come up, state your name and what you want to talk about, and you have 3 minutes or ish. We do ish. Okay.
My name is Tim Davis. I'm the general manager here over at Norton.
Tim, would you mind turning the little green button on that light on?
Right there.
Thank you.
There we go. So my name is Tim Davis. I'm the general manager over at Norton Performance right up the road. We probably should have walked here for exercise, but we drove. So we're just here to discuss the noise ordinance in the Highland City, and just a couple of things for us is we want to do a better job in regards to, the community and the residents in the community, as well as, figure out exactly what the noise ordinance going forward is going to be, so that we can, run a business as well as keep individuals in the community happy. There's a couple of things that we know we can do on our end in regards to, doing a better job with the noise ordinance dances, because that's sort of the issue that's taken place the last, I think, couple months. There's been some complaints over across from, I believe it was Highland Highway right over here, is that right?
Alpine Highway.
Alpine Highway, sorry. Should be Highland. And then the other things is, closing the garage door and some of the doors that are on the north side of the building so that sound's not getting out of the building and probably ricocheting off one of the other buildings and then kicking over to the community there that's on the east side of us. So that's just some of the things that we want to discuss, as well as a decibel reader. That's something we're interested in purchasing to make sure that we know, what the actual sound is and if we're going over or under. So, and there's some things we need to test out too to make sure that we're falling within the guidelines of the Highland City Noise Ordinance. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So thanks for being willing to work on something, and that's appreciated. Okay, anyone else want to address the council, share a concern, tell them how much you like them? No, nobody likes you, council.
We learned that at the last survey.
Yes, we did. Actually, our ratings went up.
Oh, that's true. Okay.
We went up 2 points.
2 points.
We went up 2/10, so that was good. All right, then we're on to consent items. There are 2 items on the consent. Item A is approval of meeting minutes, and item B is this 2021 sewer lining project. Does anyone want to discuss either of those or make a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Scott.
I move that the Highland City Council approve consent items 2A and 2B.
I'll second.
Motion by Scott, second by Kim.
I hope and pray this works, so
Okay.
just log in, and if it doesn't show up, we might have to do this vocally, and I very much apologize if it doesn't work.
I'm not getting it.
Yeah,
Okay, we are on to voice voting, so go ahead and leave it there. We'll start with Tim. Kim, or not Kim?
Yes.
Brittany? Kim?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
That's okay.
Kurt?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
So we will go clockwise on subsequent votes, so you know your order. All right, item 3, it's a public hearing item, and it is adopting the tentative Highland City budget for fiscal year 2021 and approving the tentative budget for Lone Peak Safety District for the same years. Tyler, are you the front man for this?
I am, thank you. Grateful to be with you, Mayor and Council, this evening. Number of things to talk about with you tonight. Here with the budget in mind, looking at the path forward, ultimately our goal to final adoption in June. We'll highlight some changes, just a few of those since we last talked in the work session on the 13th of April. We'll also discuss briefly the Lone Peak District's increase in assessments that may require the approval of the council, and then ultimately adopting the tentative budget and set the hearing for the final budget adoption there in June. So this presentation builds on our conversations that we've had over the last couple of months, and we've incorporated your feedback from previous meetings and other interaction. And we've done our best to summarize information that we've covered previously, but we're happy to address any questions or review anything that you'd like to discuss as a group. Dive in a little more in this meeting or in subsequent meetings, and we'll share with you those opportunities here a little bit later in the presentation. So first, with regard to the tentative budget, we're responding to a requirement in the code that requires the council to tentatively adopt each tentative budget on or before the first regularly scheduled meeting of the governing body in the last May of the current period. That's today. Lest you think that I'm redundant inappropriately, no, that is straight from the code, tentatively adopt the tentative budget. So in addition, of course, to providing you all an opportunity to discuss and weigh in, as the tentative budget is not final, of course, we want any feedback that you have, and we would expect the budget to change from this point until the middle of June when it's finally adopted. So our path forward here, looking ultimately at with our end goal in mind, budget adoption on June 15th. Today we're considering the tentative budget, and previously we had discussed a work session on June 1st. We'd like to include in the next council meeting on the 18th budget discussion, which will allow the council to discuss and staff to produce information in a timely manner so that the budget can be nice and polished when it needs to be adopted on June 15th. Certainly that work session will happen if there's a need, but we'd like to include that discussion in 2 weeks as an additional opportunity to have that conversation as well. And then, of course, June 15th is the day of celebration. So by way of summary, and again, happy to discuss any of the specifics within each of these summary items, but referring back to the working draft of the budget and what we've discussed in the work session, we are not in the tentative budget suggesting any changes to anything that we had included as far as revenue projections, capital and general fund projects, council appropriations, public works, fleet needs, and specifically public safety. We'll talk a little more about public safety in general, but the budget, the tentative budget for the city here maintains the same 2% that we had previously. As far as changes, we did discuss in the work session a few weeks ago the addition of a assistant public works director position and 2 additional public works operator 1 positions. There you can see the breakout of general fund and enterprise fund impact. We also discussed an additional market adjustment to staff salaries, of 3% in addition to the 3% merit increase that, again, is to keep up with market and is as a result of the pay plan study that was recently completed. Those were both discussed in this session, but have been incorporated in the tentative budget. A change that you will see in the budget there, the tentative budget, additional review of benefits estimates and actual usage brought some of those down. However, quotes are still pending, and those we hope will be finalized here within the next week, so that we can plug in the actual figures that we would expect to see for projections next year.
So, Tyler, just as a reminder, when we do benefits, we include in the benefits the police and fire staff to create a pool. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep. So we have we're spreading the cost over a broader base, and there's benefit there, cost-wise. So specific with funding the Lone Peak Public Safety District, the reason that we are bringing this approval before you today, this request for approval, there is a requirement within the amended interlocal agreement that considers property tax increase over the previous 2 years compared to what the budget would assess to the participating cities, Highland and Alpine. So when we look at the property tax revenue change, average between Highland and Alpine over fiscal years 19 then to 20 was approximately $66,000. Now, as we've gone through the process with the chiefs and the board, the Lone Peak Public Safety District Board did tentatively adopt the budget that you have as part of your packet. That would result in an increase of assessments to the 2 cities totaling approximately $100,000. So a difference there roughly of $34,000. Of course, the benefits, results of the benefits bidding, and quotes back from the vendors could reduce those estimates, and certainly we'd hope that that's the case. But in the event that that's... Any questions in particular about the public safety budget? Great. No, some of the council here does sit on that board, and they're probably sick of hearing the same story here over and over. But we want to make sure that all members of the council have an opportunity, as you may see fit, to ask questions about that. It's certainly important.
Hey, Tyler.
Yes.
I just have a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
How do you determine the expense for dispatch, Alpine versus Highland? Why is ours twice as much? Is it based on volume or population percentage?
It is actually the direct cost of the dispatch related to Highland. So of all of the costs for the district, the dispatch is billed directly to the city that those costs were, or those calls came from.
So twice as many calls are coming from Highland than Alpine?
Roughly. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Great question. Thank you. So with regard to the meeting in 2 weeks, here we've certainly appreciated your engagement. Have had a number of conversations, even one-on-one with you all. And we're coming near the end of this budget journey to get this kicked off. If council adopts the tentative budget this evening and there are no other changes at your direction, that tentative budget could be what we consider, or what you all consider, on June 15th. We want to make sure that there's plenty of opportunity for valuable feedback to be provided. So with that in mind, we would like to include this discussion, another discussion in 2 weeks, with the primary focus being the general fund and how do we allocate the revenues that we're anticipating coming into the general fund next year. I've borrowed with permission, and gratefully the mayor has produced some analysis of the budget data that we've put out, and this chart is from what he put out this weekend. But you'll see that here, this is a comparison of general fund revenues and expenses for the last few years. And if you look at that last column, that's the last two columns for 22, we're looking specifically at those revenues that exceed our anticipated expenses. And that's roughly, right now we're projecting $467,000 next year. The council, you may choose to allocate those funds to the fund balance. As we talked previously, the state will allow us to reach a fund balance equal to 35%, up to from 25% of annual revenues. So those funds could go just to the fund balance, could go to projects such as Mitchell Hollow Park, or to other priorities as appropriate. But that's, we feel, an important discussion that we could have here in a couple of weeks. Certainly, if there's other areas of focus, other questions you'd like us to prepare information on for that discussion in a couple of weeks, we'd be happy to do so. So certainly happy to take questions. And once those questions are answered, we would recommend that council hold a public hearing, adopt the tentative budget, and approve the increase in assessments to Highland in Lone Peak Public Safety District's budget as well.
So the quick question before council. Okay. The 466 that we're projecting as surplus for next year, that excludes any of the American Rescue Plan money, which we're not getting until later this year. And at such time as we get it and we know exactly what it is and what strings come with it, then we can make a decision on that separate from everything else.
That's
right?
Correct.
Okay. And then the 466, we could, what are our options, like putting it into a capital fund to be used for any variety of capital projects, or do we have to put it in a specific capital fund like the park capital fund?
No, and with the state's revision to the fund balance requirements and limits, we can leave it in the general fund as well.
Okay.
But if the council wants to allocate that specifically to a capital fund, that's an option.
Okay, or the council could just say, we'll hold for now, we know that money's available, and as we approach decisions where we have more information, we have that money that we can use to fund whatever.
That is correct.
Okay.
So can we ask questions
Yes.
from council?
Oh,
Okay. Or do you want to do the public hearing?
Let's go ahead. You're done with your presentation, that was it?
Yes, thank you.
So let's open it up for a public hearing. If anybody wants to comment on the budget as presented, or have thoughts on budgets for next year you'd like to share with us, you're welcome to do that. While we're waiting, is there anybody online wants to say anything?
There's no one online, thank you.
Okay, there is no one online. It's a beautiful day. They shouldn't be here. They should be out working in their yards. So good for you, residents who aren't here. I said nothing about them, right? You knew I'd find a way, Colby, didn't you? Okay. So with that, I will close the public hearing. Public hearing closed. And we added a little levity to the meeting. Thank you. Thank you, Colby, for being the guinea pig. Okay, Scott.
So I had a couple questions. You know, as long as I've been on the council, the revenue is oftentimes conservatively estimated. I mean, we usually end up with more revenue. I don't remember a year we didn't, but how conservative are your estimates on both property tax and sales tax revenue? Do you feel like you're being really conservative, or you're being a little more liberal than we've been in the past? What's your feeling? Because it seems like every year like last year, of course, we didn't know what happened with COVID, but we had $500,000 more in property, or not property, but sales tax come in. So what's your feelings, Tyler?
So we are appropriately conservative, in my opinion. Approximately 1% increase on the property tax side, and 3% over what we were budgeting on the sales tax side. And with property tax, I do want to point out, of course, that as property values fluctuate, the city does not see the same return or the same piece of that.
Right, except with growth, and we've got a lot of growth going on right now.
So it kind of depends how fast those homes get built and then recorded, so that the, what's the cutoff date? Do you know for when a property is subject to increase? Kurt, you might know. So
You mean they'll send out an assessment? Is that what you're saying?
right, so if a home is completed in October, it won't get assessed for that year?
Traditionally, I think it's somewhere at the end of August.
Okay, end of August. So any homes
Could be September.
that
All
are,
right. So, continuing on with a couple other questions. When do you estimate that the certified tax rate will be published? Because we have to vote on that on the 15th as well, right, in June?
We do, and I'll do some research there to make sure that we're on top of that. I don't have that answer for you here at the moment.
Okay.
we had a problem last year with it, but I think this year.
Because of COVID, I think.
Yeah. I would guess sometime around the 1st of June.
So the other question I have is, we're estimating the surplus, and we've always kept the general fund revenue surplus at 25%. I mean, now the state allows us to do up to 35%, but that 25%, or the amount of the 25%, kind of goes up every year because of their budget does. Is there a compelling reason why the staff wants to move it up to 30%? It just seems to me, and we're going to be talking, I guess, more about this during the next couple of weeks, but we have some capital projects that we would like to get jump-started. And I was thinking a lot about Mountain Ridge Park, but there's constantly mentioned Mitchell Hollow Park, which I'm not opposed to, but I wasn't aware we'd been discussing new things there. Do you know? Kim, you live there.
No, I just mentioned one of these days we should fix the baseball field.
Well, I agree with that too, but I just thought in the explanation material, it talked about Mitchell Hollow Park, and I wondered if
And I wonder if that was wrong. We've
something.
always been starting to talk about the Beacon Hills Park. In the prior, it was Beacon Hills and Mountain Ridge, so I don't know if maybe it got switched or something.
So I guess my feeling is I would probably keep the reserve at 25% and maybe work on a couple of these projects that we've been delaying for years, so that's just my opinion. Okay, thank you. I just was curious on those things.
I think on the reserve, we could do we could establish a policy of 3 months of capital to run the city for 3 months, which, as it turns out, was around 25%. Now that will go up or down depending on, like if we hire more people, then it'll go up a little bit. But that's probably a metric that we could agree on and say, then anything else can go into whatever else we have. I think that's a reasonable thing. And also, the 3-month is what bonding agencies look at when they determine whether you're a good risk or not. And if you're at the 3-month.
And to put in context, difference of 5%, we're talking roughly $10 million of general fund revenue. 1% equals roughly $100,000. So 5%, we're talking about roughly $500,000 there. Our thought process behind the 25 to 35%, 25% is about 3 months of expenses, so keeping that within 3 to 6 months. The reason that the state is seeing fit to increase that requirement is over the past few decades, we're seeing different circumstances that have put cities and other local entities in very scary circumstances. And so making sure that there is enough available, but to your point, Councilman Smith, certainly don't want to have too much. So that's an important decision for the council, and why we would like or would suggest that the discussion in 2 weeks certainly focus on that and arrive at a decision as much as possible.
Go ahead, I'm done.
Okay, I have some questions, Mayor, if that's okay.
Yep.
Okay, Councilmember Smith asked about the percentage of increase from last year's sales tax. Now, we had an increase of 500,000. Are you mentioning the 3% on top of that 500,000 we had last year?
Yes, compared to what was budgeted at the mid-year adjustment. So there was an increase. Initially, we were anticipating roughly $2.4 million coming in this year. That's been revised through the mid-year adjustment to 2.9, so that 3% is on top of that.
2.9, it's on top of the 2.9?
Correct.
To me, that seems a little aggressive. I mean, we came out of the pandemic with online sales and that. I get nervous that we're not quite sure how we're going to respond after the pandemic. Maybe we all keep doing our same thing and buying patterns we have, but so you're saying what percentage increase would have we had last year in our sales tax with that 500,000?
With the 500, so the 2.9, up to the 2.9?
Yeah.
From the previous year. We're closer to 20%. It was high teens.
So and then we're keeping that and we're adding 3% onto it?
Yes.
That's a concern. I'm just, that's a red flag to me that we're anticipating keeping the revenue the same in our sales tax. Now, I'm hoping I'm wrong and the concern's not founded, but I was a little spooked. So when Scott asked about are we being conservative, or are we being, you used the word liberal, I would say now we went the liberal side, but that's just my personal opinion. But so it'd be interesting to really watch. I just think we have to be careful, and I don't know if the other council feel that I don't know if we're going to keep our sales tax the same as what we had last year, because it was a different year. Do you feel like we'll kind of keep that going?
I think it seems like there's kind of some pent-up demand, maybe after the pandemic. I tend to be an optimist. I think it's good to be conservative, though.
I mean, yeah, with the stimulus, you've had some stimulus checks go out, and so March, we should have seen a bump, but, we'll just see how it kind of, I'm just saying, I think, that will be part of our discussion to take in consideration.
That's a fair point. I think when we talked about it last time, you felt like, and I'm talking to Tyler here, that at least half of that increase was going to be a permanent fixture, right?
And so that's why I was a little surprised to see that you brought the whole thing forward.
So then maybe, our norm is 6 to 7% increase year over year.
Mm-hmm.
So if you took that 50% and then added 6, which would be a normal year.
Or if you said last year was a 6% and then this year's a 6, and see what, I don't know. Well, it'll be interesting. I'm hoping our online sales, we've really benefited the city from online sales.
Yeah, and so some of that we think is a permanent increase, but the Mayfair ruling or the Wayfair ruling had a
And that did
played a
pop in,
role
I think, full
and-
plate, yeah.
But that's worth thinking about. I would agree with that.
As we look, so Tyler, as we get ready for 2 weeks down the road, if you wouldn't help us maybe with what our bond balances are, you'll give us, and I've talked to you about, hey, do we have some accounts out there like our open space accounts, cemetery, where we might have cash, but what are they committed to, or what are they restricted to, so we understand. I believe the 30% Councilmember Smith's talking about is unrestricted funds, but what's our balances in all of these different accounts? Because it's nice to see a budget, but some of this money just kind of keeps slipping through, such as the open space. I think that 340's been there the whole time I've kind of been on council. Maybe we spent a little bit, I think, on some tennis courts, but that's an account we need to at least be aware that's out there. So
Great, thank you.
going to page number 4, and this is underneath the city council's budget. If you could just help me, Tyler, understand, we have down underneath, just to help me understand what these are for, 10-41-2021, it says professional organizational membership. Is for that the League of Cities?
That's part of it, yes. So there's an annual membership charge to cities to participate in the league. We benefit from their services, particularly with the upcoming American Rescue Plan. There was some advocacy that hopefully will cut down on some of the red tape in those funds coming.
I'm not necessarily seeing if they're good or bad. I'm just trying to understand what the expenditure was for.
Great. Also comes out of that Mountain Land Association of Governments and Utah Lake Commission.
Okay. And then I noticed that down on 10-4131, professional services of $22,300. What's that for?
Portion of that is, or the most significant portion is actually broadcasting these meetings here.
And then we have down 10-4161, miscellaneous supplies and expense.
So there are publication and expenses such as the traffic measurement there came out of that account.
Okay. So that was out of the council fee. Okay. Okay.
So, Tyler, question for you. The Lone Peak Business Alliance fee, is that in the professional organizations there, or is that?
I'll have to see if I don't believe it comes out of that particular account. There are a few different professional organizations. We try to align those within the fund and the department that makes most sense with, but I'll pull that information for you, Mayor.
And the Mayor, item number still underneath council, 10-41-63, $18,000 in council appropriation.
Yep, so that's a line that we have, we're proposing be repurposed, and for this coming fiscal year, we would like to allocate $3,000 for each council member and the mayor to identify if there's a need for an innovative or a timely project where you could collaborate with other members of the council, but that $3,000 would be something there that could be used at your discretion.
Nathan?
So if that's a project we wanted to promote, that's some seed money to do the investigation and the studies and everything.
Correct, that's an option.
Or Christmas lights, whatever.
Okay. I mean, it's interesting. I'm just going through our own budget. I'm going, we have a budget of $126,000, and I keep going, what does the council spend all this on? I'm just trying to make sure we're responsible in our
No,
budget.
it's not on bottled water.
So another example of 10-41-61 would be flowers when somebody has surgery or there's a death in the family or things like that.
So that was, so I noticed that the city's been very kind to individuals that have had things. So if we're sending out flowers to any of the employees or things, is it where it's council-led or if it's something that happens within the city?
Sorry?
Is it mainly where it's the council sending condolence flowers or things that way, or?
It's whether it's an employee or a council-led or
Okay.
or anything like that.
And then fine to have it at the council.
So we combined some, because we're using the council appropriations for the council projects, we combined a couple accounts, that's why you see that jump in that amount.
Now skipping to page number 9, underneath recorder, I'm just trying to verify, this appears to be what our new election fees are going to be, is we have 70, underneath 10-47-22 elections could be 70,000. Then we have underneath 10-4728, software of 16,000. Tyler, why is there a software fee if we're having the county run the elections?
So that software fee is, and Stephanie can comment there if I'm mistaken, but that software is independent of elections. That is a meeting management tool that is being considered. That hasn't been conclusive.
So when you're talking, so to help me, meeting management, is that for the whole city? Is that for just the recorders? Is it for the communicating with residents? Is it for staff, for $16,000?
So a portion of that is for this new meeting management software that we're considering at this point. That meeting management software would handle our electronic voting. It would handle the interface that you would see when you come into the meeting. It would handle our management of our agendas. It would also take care of minutes, not take care of them, but it would reformat how we handle our minutes as I'm producing them here. A portion of that, I believe, also is with the adjusting our code as well. So, okay.
Is that, I've noticed that some other cities have online after the meetings, like how we have it recorded, they have maybe little segments you can just click and go right to the segment. Is that software do that also?
The software that we're looking at, that is a feature that they're working on right now.
Okay.
So.
Jumping to page 19. Underneath engineer, 10-66-31. We jumped from $35,000 in this budget year to $185,000. Can you share, Tyler, a little bit what happens here?
Yeah, and as we are seeing, of course, a tremendous amount of construction and development going on. And so this is to engage external expertise to supplement our public works and engineering staff. Todd, of course, leaving the city there, that'll be all the more important to make sure that we're able to keep up with the workload.
So is this kind of a gap in between, some maybe, just open the public that our engineer in the city is leaving for another job. Is this for the gap period, or are we going to be paying for a city engineer, an assistant city engineer, and then outside services also?
The reasoning behind this increase was identified prior to Todd's announcement of his departure, but I mentioned his departure as another reason that we would want to make sure that we're able to keep up with that workload.
So that is, a lot of it's because of the Ridgeview project and the inspections.
Correct.
That we're going to have to outsource.
Some is inspection, some is drawing plans.
Plan reviews.
Getting like the road plans done, getting sewer lines drawn, that kind of stuff.
Have we ever done what our expense versus what the revenue will be to see if in a sense, having Ridgeview as a developer, we're paying the developer to develop in the city, or are they covering their costs with the impact fees and their builder fees? Is that going to cover all the expenses with Ridgeview, or is the city residents paying for Ridgeview?
So impact fees and the building permit fees wouldn't apply to this category. We actually have civil review fees and inspection fees that would apply to this.
Will we cover it, or, it's a political question I'm asking.
No, I understand.
Is the residents of Highland going to be paying for Ridgeview's development?
Well, in some cases, and as I was mentioning, in some cases, we would break even. In some cases, we won't. We'll end up paying.
Okay.
Just to make sure that those inspections are done and that they are, the infrastructure is installed correctly the first time. We felt like that was important to do because with the capital projects and everything else that we have going on, it was important to bring somebody in and make sure that the infrastructure was installed correctly and and that was a priority to prevent problems down the road.
Okay, thank you. I mean, it is a little concerning that, you know, that we're, as residents, we're paying for a developer to come develop.
Well, we could have had American Fork collect the future property tax.
And Scott, I understand. I mean, there's just a lot of expense, you know.
I know there's expenditures and things.
Yeah, I mean, we're increasing some of our public safety employees because of, I think, so you keep going. And we, with the decisions made, and we always can talk about the sour grapes or things, it's just, it's a hard thing where you're going, hey, let's have a developer come and pay them. So.
Yeah, well, it would be nice.
And Scott, I appreciate, I know that there was a lot of work in the council at the time trying to make the best decisions. And this, like you said, after a bit, we might get property tax. Hopefully, we'll get some sales tax. They have 8 acres of commercial over there. Hopefully, there'll be some sales tax, and so there can be some wins that come down the road, and so.
I mean,
That applies to all development, not just Boyer's project, right? Because we have a lot of development happening.
well, primarily they're on 2 projects, but, you know, the other alternative is to bring extra staff in to try to get the inspections done. So we felt this was the most efficient.
Well, and just being transparent, that's what I thought we hired the extra engineer for. You know, I mean, so we had Todd, and at the time when we brought in that second engineer, it was, hey, we have Ridgeview coming. And now we're saying, okay, we did that, and we're going to add more cost. And it just trying to watch it.
No, I agree. And we are watching it closely. When you have the as aggressive a capital improvement program that we have with, you know, 3 wells under construction and sewer lines under construction and Canal Boulevard and, you know, half the city under construction at one time, plus all this, I mean.
I know, it's a busy, the economy is going nuts, and we're all seeing it around I mean, as I talked to Kobe Gibson, you know, we have up in Beacon Hills have a development going. You know, we have down by Kim, we have a development going on. Over Scott, we have a road going by you, and all the stuff up in Ridgeview up there. It's busy.
Just for some perspective, we anticipate, we do an average of about 100 permits, single-family homes or units a year. We anticipate about that just out of Ridgeview, plus what we normally do. So
you're thinking 200 permits this next year about?
At least.
Okay. My next question comes on page 27, item number 20-43-37. We've been budgeting $25,000 for equipment replacement. Tyler, is that mainly for playgrounds? That's not the park equipment. That's open space, like playground equipment, or what's that? It's in the open space.
Sorry, what page? Let me catch
I'm sorry, page 27, item number 20-43-73.
So there's playground equipment, playground maintenance and repair there on line 26, ending in 26.
So that's the mowing equipment.
Okay, that's just the allocating of the expense from the Parks Department that would be doing for open space then.
So yeah, so what we're trying to do is we're trying to allocate money each year to pay for mowers and not only the push ones, but the big
Jacobsons.
Big Jacobsons and so forth.
Now, we had $25,000 budgeted this year. Did we replace equipment this year? In this budget year?
It looks like we have spent so far about $6,000. So.
I agree, the equipment's getting old, we've got to keep it up, so. Okay, one of my last, page number 48, number 44-36-13. I'm sure WPI would be interested in this question. This is the town center exaction fee?
Correct.
So can you just share how that happens and what kind of goes on?
Okay, so when the town center was originally constructed, which is this building, public safety building, and the roads around it, and Town Center Boulevard, the city entered into agreements with surrounding property owners to help build the infrastructure. That's the roads, water, sewer, and PI lines and so forth. And to reimburse the contribution from those surrounding property owners, it's called exaction fee, which is a terrible title. It should be called infrastructure reimbursement fee. And so as the agreements state as property is developed, there'll be a charge to the people that developed that we collect, and then we reimburse the expenses.
Now, I've noticed, with WPI, I've noticed the city's carried a balance with WPI. Is there any other developers that we're carrying a balance with similar like WPI that is owed some, what I call pioneering fees?
Same thing.
Or, what we have classified as exaction. As we look at that, other than the WPI balance that we have out there owed to a developer that put the infrastructure in, are there other developers we owe money to?
We've had other developers. We've had Night West. We've had, who else? A couple others. And I believe we paid them off this year, correct?
We're
paid off
wrapping
this
up
year.
the analysis there to make sure, but that we have funds available to retire those.
Those off.
So if you happen to have any balances open on that, I think it's important for the council to know that there's some money owing from the city, it's not, I understand it's a pioneering agreement, which means that as it builds, they'll get reimbursed, but it'd be kind of nice to know what some of those balances are
And
going
they're based on area. So, but yes, you're correct.
Now, we have some stuff, is Beacon Hills even? I mean, at one time, I've seen some Beacon Hills money that was given, and what was supposed to happen with the Beacon Hills money?
Define even.
Well, it appears there must have been some money charged the developer that did Beacon Hills. Was that a pioneering money, or was that just what was that?
You got to give me a little more to go on.
Northwest Northwest exaction fee.
Okay, so they had separate Northwest impact fees.
Okay.
Those were,
Wasn't that the mud debt that we ended up?
That's different. That's Suncrest. So they had Northwest impact fees, and those were, when we redid our impact fees back in 2016, those were built into those.
Is there anyone we owe up in that area? Like how we would owe down here in the town center some pioneering agreements? Is there anything outstanding in pioneering agreements up there?
Not that I'm aware of. We got surprised a few years ago, but for Suncrest, but not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Not the agreements we're aware of.
And Tyler, I'm going to ask the question, just because we've been bit by a city before. Are you tracking the bond payments to make sure if there's one that has a balloon on it or anything else that we know when and what's owed at what time? Because the city, I understand, Scott, wasn't there a time we got burned because there was a balloon payment and we didn't pay it and we had to pay a huge fee?
You're absolutely right.
I'm just trying to make sure that we're looking at those documents, that we're aware, just because it's happened in the past, and it's not common, just, so we are noticing those things.
Yes.
Hit twice. We got hit with the PI and the shares and that balloon.
Right,
yeah.
a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. I don't know, I think I might, so I have one more. One more. Okay, on page number 60, this is dealing with culinary water. We have underneath 55-40-11, and it deals with the salaries and increase, just because it's such a large increase. My understanding is as a city council, we're going to be increasing the water fee for our culinary water $3 a month. My understanding is that $3 was necessary because of a new well, but the wages here, is that part of the increase?
That is part of the increase.
Okay, so it's that $3 increase that we're going to be voting on to pass pertains to some of those new employees plus the new well. Is there other things, Tyler, that it might be that $3 is tied to?
So the overall maintenance and projects that are necessary in the plan?
The future?
Yes. Uh-huh. We'll talk more about this in 2 weeks, and certainly happy to dive into the detail with the utility rate study. The increase is influenced, the majority of the increase is due to projects coming up. So the inclusion of these new positions has a very limited impact, a much smaller impact than compared to the projects coming up.
Thank you, and I apologize to the council. I know you probably heard some information.
No, this is great. We talked about some of it on the 13th. Can I add a follow-up question? And then, because I'm sure everybody else has a lot of questions.
Scott, can I
Yeah, go
ask
ahead.
Tyler to follow up on the operating days and the extra capital projects and the percentage of the two? Answer that.
So you'll recall when we had the presentation from Fred Philpott, here, a major consideration, or one of the measures that we look at, is the number of days of operating cash on hand. And in the case of culinary water, with the projects that are coming online, we actually go into the red here in the very near term. So that's the reason for the increase. The increase is 30%. Most residents, it would simply be an adjustment in the base rate of just over $3. That 30% increase will also apply to the usage rates as well. So if someone's using more than the 6,000 gallons, then they would see an increase in the usage rate as well.
So the primary increase in the rate isn't staffing, it's more capital projects and the operating days on hand.
So that actually was kind of addressing my question. So it seems like the base rate now is around $12.47 for the first 6,000 gallons, and then it's like 78 cents per 1,000 gallons, up for another 10,000 gallons, and it goes to 204, if I remember correctly. So you're talking about a 30% increase in the base, 30% increase in the 78 cents, and a 30% increase in the 204. Because then again, I saw several of my neighbors greening up their lawn with culinary water and hoses, because our neighborhood, we have our own pressurized system, said we're not going to turn it on basically until the 1st of May, so people were without their hoses and culinary water. And I think that little period, or that amount of water between the 6,000 and the 16,000 gallons is probably where we need to really kind of focus some of this on, because I think we should encourage people not to use their culinary water to irrigate their yards when they have pressurized irrigation. Do you see what I mean? That was my concern, because it seems like 78 cents for 1,000 gallons is awfully cheap, which is nice, but we have a water shortage with all the drought and the growth of the city. So that we talked a lot about that. I thought it was reasonable. Yeah.
And the presentation again in 2 weeks, we'll have the budget discussion. We'll also have the public hearing on utility rates. We haven't recommended any adjustments in the tiering, essentially, and that sounds like what you're referring to, Councilman Smith. That's certainly an option. And as we consider rates, and particularly in future years as well, that's something to keep in mind as you may wish to influence behavior differently than what it has in the past.
Well, I don't like increasing taxes or fees, but it just seems that we have a water shortage, we have a growth in the city that perhaps we need to really kind of discourage using culinary water inappropriately when we've got a pressurized irrigation system. So my second question, and we really haven't talked too much about, in this year's budget, you've done a study comparing base salaries with other cities. I'm sure it was in an email that I didn't read, but your feeling is that we need to raise everybody's salary by 3%, plus there's a 3% merit increase possible. Is that correct? Am I understanding that?
That's correct.
So what cities did we compare to? Just all the surrounding cities or kind of state of
We did up and
Utah?
down the Wasatch Front.
Okay.
With cities that are similar to characteristics in size, but we used a range of larger and smaller. We didn't want to go like pure Salt Lake City, right? Because that's not our typical market, or a pure Roosevelt, right? But we're happy to share what we did, and you can see the data points that we collected.
So the 3% salary adjustments aren't necessarily applied equally among all the employees, right? It's, some are further off the mark than others.
No, that would be applied equally.
To all employees, for wherever they are today, they all get the 3%.
And that's the market adjustment. Again, the merit increase, also 3% potential. That is based on performance and a very constructive assessment of an employee's performance. So that's not a guaranteed. And we want to make that less of a default. If that's the only raise that we have to help employees combat inflation and whatnot, that becomes a challenge. So that's important
I really want to be fair to the employees, but I guess my understanding is we're doing this basically so that we're competitive with other cities, because we're having quite a bit of turnover in staff.
Correct.
And so if we're a little more competitive, there won't be that incentive to leave. Is that basically what you're thinking? Okay.
Didn't we get a third party to do
Correct.
an analysis? It was Swallow, right? So it's
Yep.
not
Right.
staff doing that market analysis, it's actually a third party.
I just hadn't seen the analysis, and I
We'll send
miss
it out.
emails.
And we'll send it out and show you how to adjust for everybody.
Okay.
So,
I'm not
Mayor-
opposed to it, but.
Mayor, I'm going to ask a favor. Can I do a squirrel moment, just since this is Todd's last meeting, our city engineer?
Sure.
It's about water we were just talking on.
Okay.
Todd? he
He's
was
not
just
here.
He's on the phone, he had to go,
Oh.
he had to step out.
I'll have my squirrel moment later, because
Fine.
it's about culinary water and pressurized, that with the rates and some things that might tie into that, so.
Okay. Anything else? Oh, I see Todd coming in.
Here he comes. He's coming.
Thank you for letting me have my squirrel moment. Means I'm chucking us in a different direction. Todd, are you aware, as we talk about culinary water, Councilmember Smith talked about some of our residents using that for irrigation. I know that we have one subdivision being Viewpoint, that everything is on culinary water. Do we have any other subdivisions in Highland that's all on culinary water?
Not full subdivisions that I'm aware of. A lot of the old part of the city, there are still people that are on culinary water.
They haven't hooked onto PA?
Have never hooked onto
So
pressurized
as
irrigation.
we look at billing up in Viewpoint, as Scott brought up that, we're looking at this new increase in water, is Viewpoint billed at a different rate, or is it they use more culinary, their rate will go up?
No, we will treat them, we will continue to supplement culinary water for PI, but they will be billed similar to PI.
Okay, so they have a PI-built system that we pressurize?
Correct.
Okay, so I didn't, okay.
We pressurize it with culinary water because we don't have a tank that can get that high, a pond that can get that high.
Okay.
And so their system is completely separate than the rest of the culinary system, and PI for that matter. And so we will continue to bill them like we normally are. We wouldn't bill them for outdoor use with the culinary water.
But if we have an older resident that has not hooked onto our pressurized, as they use water to water their grass that was culinary, their bill is increasing, so.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
The next question comes into Ridgeview, dealing with water. At one time when Ridgeview was coming in, I thought they had like their own well for the pressurized system. Are they running their own water for PI over there? Are they coming on our system?
Yeah, so the water has been submitted through the state. The current plats that are being recorded now, they have dedicated water.
Water shares?
Water shares,
Okay.
correct. It's not the well. I mean, there were talks years ago about us using the well that was on the state property. They're retaining that well So they've given us surface and stored water rights similar to any other subdivision.
And is that AF Canyon, is it Lehigh Water, is that what?
Yeah, so the surface water is American Fork water, so American Fork irrigation. It's historically been put on that property for years. And then the stored right is Highland Conservation.
Okay. That was just, and then they'll hook into our standard culinary. It's just, Scott, if you remember, there's a lot of conversations, was it, where we going to hook into their well there and that, and I wasn't sure how that all feathered out.
No,
so.
we're treating them like any other subdivision.
Okay.
So they have a big irrigation well that's north of the high school.
Correct.
The thing, so they're still going to use that to irrigate the property south of the development.
That is my understanding.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's problems with that well, though, I understand.
They
too.
still get American Fork irrigation water out of the canyon that will continue to go down the pipe. There's a 24-inch pipe that runs down North County Boulevard. So that will continue to provide water to south of the canal.
But they have plenty of water shares.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
I heard they were rich in water, so
Yeah.
you're helping me out with the water. So out of AF Canyon, what percentage, we own a lot of Lehigh Water. Now, you brought up Highland Conservation Water. Is that all AF Canyon too?
No, that is stored rights. So that
Up
is
at Deer
what-
Creek?
Correct.
Okay.
And we are the majority stockholder in Highland Conservation, and that's our stored water. The only water that comes out of American Fork Canyon is American Fork, Lehigh, and Pleasant Grove irrigation.
Okay.
And we are owner in stock in all three of those companies.
Just a little add-on question. So I understand the Highland Glen Pond is filled with Pleasant Grove irrigation water, is that correct?
Correct. That's the only water we fill it with.
Do you think they're the ones that are putting koi in our pond?
No. I know where the water comes from. It's not, that's not putting koi in the pond.
But it could be any resident that
Yeah.
lives by there when the water's running.
I'm sure
We
that
were
some,
on Fox News with that.
Oh, on the national news?
Yes.
Oh, so they just, there was a huge koi that was caught in our.
17 pounds, yeah.
Yep.
So,
Any other questions for me?
no, but thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for allowing me to have a squirrel moment.
All right. If there's no other questions, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion. I move that the city council adopt the Highland City tentative budget for fiscal year 2021 to 2022, approve the increase in assessments to Highland and Lone Peak Public Safety District's tentative budget for fiscal year 2021 to 2022, and set a date of June 15, 2021 for approval of the city's final budget for the fiscal year.
I'll second it.
Motion by Kim, second by Scott. We'll start with Brittany.
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Tim? All right, that passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Can I make just one little comment quick?
Yes.
I want to thank Tyler again for the organization of the budget. I just think it's much better organized and better to understand, so I really appreciate it. About you?
The reason why I'm laughing, I got an email from Tyler, and Mayor, it was your request for the data thing, and I opened it up, and I couldn't understand a word what was going to, and when I called Tyler, I was trying to get definitions on how to read it. He goes, that was only for data for the mayor to be able to pull data from, but it confused me pretty good.
It was not, it was.
I thought it was
useful
Scott
to me.
I'm me.
The first question I asked Tyler, is this how Scott wants it?
All right, next item, preliminary plat, Sunrise Farms. Kelly, you're on deck.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and members of the council. This is a request by Patterson Development for a 10-lot, single-family residential subdivision. This is a vicinity map. It's just west of 6000 West and north of Timpanogos Highway. It is zoned R140 and is designated as the low-density residential in our general plan. This is the preliminary plat that was submitted. It is a total of 13.59 acres, and like I said, there's those 10 lots. And the lot sizes are ranging from the smallest is 23,175 square feet, and the largest is 40,325, just under an acre. And then, as you can see, just on the southern portion of the subdivision, there is that parcel designated for future development. I based the density formula just off of, I subtracted that square footage of parcel A just to make sure that the density of these 10 lots matched what's required by our R140 standards. And it did meet it. Once you subtract that square footage and then you take the total, divide it by 40,000, it gives you 10. And then they are allowed 25% of those lots to be between 20,000 and 30,000 square feet, and they have 2 of them. And then the main axis there is an axis that just comes off of 6,000 West that you can see on the right side of the screen. And because they are planning to extend the road in the future, they do have to have that temporary turnaround, which they have on the plat because it exceeds the 600-foot minimum for a cul-de-sac. We did hold a public hearing over at Planning Commission, and for that we had to send out the public hearing notices to the properties within 500 feet of the subject property, and it was also posted in the newspaper and on our state and city websites. There was one written correspondence received that was included in the packet from a resident from Bull River. And at Planning Commission, we did hold that public hearing. There were a few residents that commented, one being the one that sent in the written response, or written correspondence, and a majority of the concern, if you listen to it, you may have not, was revolving just making sure that it does follow R140 standards, and we went through that with the residents at the Planning Commission meeting. And there was also concerns of just the overall development as a whole, which with this preliminary plat, it is administrative and it follows R140 standards, so it's not something we can really address right now, but we will obviously address that in the future. And the Planning Commission did move to recommend approval, that should say recommend approval, for the preliminary plat. And we, as the staff, recommend that the City Council hold, or you don't have to hold a public hearing, excuse me, just that you consider the request and accept the findings and approve this preliminary plat, Sunrise Farms.
Any
And the
questions?
engineer for it is also present if you have any questions for him.
I have a couple questions, and it kind of addresses the correspondence we had from the Bull River citizens just west of this development. There was a concern about a partially filled ravine on the east side of their property, west side of the Patterson development, and whether there was going to be any work on maybe fixing that ravine better. It has a bunch of cement.
Yeah, so we did address that, and they actually added a note on the plat, or not on the plat, but on the construction plans, the civils that will be reviewed in the future when it goes to final, but they, I'm not going to be able to remember it verbatim, but just that it would be removed and cleaned up and graded evenly is what I'm remembering, Ken, if that's right, basically.
So there were questions again too about possibility of putting an 8-foot rather than a 6-foot fence along there. Now, I think city ordinances allow a 6-foot fence. Is there discussion about putting at least a 6-foot fence along the side, distressed concrete, or is there any decision on that? Because I just would like to address some of their concerns, because it's always hard when you have a development next door.
Right. Because it is a low-density development next to a low-density development, it's nothing that we can require of the developer. Obviously, residents that move in there can have the freedom to build a 6-foot fence, just like any other resident in Highland, but it's
So
nothing.
the residents themselves would be responsible for any fencing?
That is correct.
Or the residents that
On the
are
other side.
on the other side
Yeah.
can put a fence up.
Could put
That's
one
their
up too,
choice.
yeah.
Or they could share costs.
But they can't put an 8-foot fence up?
No.
No, they cannot.
Right, it can be 6 foot at the most.
Yes.
Okay. And then, of course, there was a request to have the developer just do one-story homes, which I don't think as a council we can mandate by any means if they meet everything else for R140. But I don't know of any council that's ever done that. Is that right?
Yes, you are correct. That is not something that the council legally can mandate with a development like this.
I'd like to make a motion.
Sure.
Okay. I move that the city council accept the findings and approve the Sunrise Farm preliminary plat, subject to the 3 stipulations recommended by staff.
Is there a second?
I will second it.
Motion by Kim, second by Kurt. We're starting with Kim.
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Tim? Brittany?
Yes.
Okay, that passes unanimously. But you have to stay. I'm going to bite my tongue so I don't get in trouble again. Next item is a public hearing on a purchase agreement with WPI for land in town center.
You know what? I don't think, no, we didn't have to hold a public hearing. My goodness, that's my mistake. I was like, we didn't hold a public hearing for the preliminary plat. Okay, I'm actually going to be presenting this one,
So
by the
no
way.
public
So
hearing on this?
This does have a public hearing. That was my mistake.
Okay.
So this is the request for city council approval for the purchase agreement. This is between the city and WPI. It's a little difficult to see the colors, but the agreement is so that whole green block is Highland City property, and they're requesting to purchase the red on the west, if you can see my mouse right here, and then the blue on the south, and the total purchase price would be $48,660, and that is at $20 per square foot. And just to clarify, this is for the retail building that was approved at the last city council meeting for the site plan and the final plat. And this was also, I guess it's on the next slide, at the April 20th meeting. These little parcels were declared as surplus property on April 20th. So the process moving forward, we do need to hold a public hearing for the consideration of this purchase request, and then the council will need to take action on either approving or denying the purchase contract. Like I said, it's at $20 per square foot. The contract is obviously attached in the staff report, but just the terms, this water source protection, it's simply because we have our oh my goodness, the pump station. Is it a pump station?
So,
It's a well. It's a well that's just on the south of the property.
We pump it, though.
Okay. But it's basically just the same wording that was in the previous contract when they first purchased the property a few years ago. And then a term that was added because of the conversations we've been having over the last few meetings is that the C of O, the certificate of occupancy for the building, would not be issued without first having buyer, who is WPI, and seller, the city, brought to resolution an application with UDOT for its access. And so that access, here, I'll just bring it right here. That is option B, and in the contract it does talk about WPI having the primary responsibility to submitting that application to UDOT to seek approval for this one, and then the seller or the city would take primary responsibility for getting contact with Rocky Mountain Power about option A. And so far Todd did have a conversation with Rocky Mountain Power very quickly, and Joanne actually contacted them as well, but they are just working on getting back to us, is basically what that was left at, to my understanding. Is that correct, Todd?
I thought we got a text today saying that it had been turned down.
Today?
Just, that was the information that you and I talked about. Do you want me to go? Rock, paper, scissors.
So I was able to track down the gentleman who manages the power substation and explain what we were asking for. He obviously passed the buck up the line of Pacific Corp, and once that happens, it's difficult to get a straight answer, and it takes some time, but he definitely was leaning towards no. Option A would not be an option, is what I was told on the phone. Now, that is not a guarantee. He said, you know, let's go ahead and send the exhibit up the line and see what they say. But I think at this point, option A is a long shot, and option B is going to be a little bit more doable. But then we've got to go back to UDOT and plead our case as a city.
So, I mean, this is the clinching factor for me, how I vote a little bit, because I really think we need more access into this parking area.
Agreed.
I think everybody's in agreement, right?
Yep.
But I guess I'm a little concerned, or wonder why Rocky Mountain wouldn't want to, if we put an access off of SR 92, just west of the building, why they couldn't run that into their parking area there and access off that road, because it seems like with their access, it makes it less likely we're going to get our access.
Correct.
If you combine the two, it seemed more likely that we could get one.
What I was told is that that was designed so that they could pull a semi through and actually make a big U-turn. And by coming in, they're worried about making the turn in a narrow 30-foot access. And so they wanted the straight shot off of SR 92 to turn in, is what I was told over the phone. So their big concern with option A is they see this area as a future expansion for the substation, and they would like to actually expand in both directions. And by providing an access across there, they feel like we're bisecting their property. So that was the concern, and he was leaning towards this just wouldn't happen. So I think at this point, we're going to prepare the document and pass it up the line and see what Pacific Corp says. But we also need to start moving forward with UDOT, because one way or the other, we need a secondary access for the site.
So what do you think your chance of getting the secondary access if or Rocky Mountain won't work with you on that?
I think that option B is much more likely. UDOT is much more, what's the word I'm looking for?
Malleable?
Flexible, malleable, with a municipality versus a private developer. And so I think if we go in and plead our case as a municipality asking for some help, and we'll see where it goes. So.
Would you be asking for just a right in and right out there, or
I think that is the only thing they would allow us to do. So.
I'm just trying to think how that solves the problem.
Any access would be helpful. A full left there, I think, is not feasible.
Right.
Due to, and it ultimately depends where UDOT decides to put the signal as well. Is it A at 5600, or is it at B at the town center? So I think in the future, you know, they'll determine which one is more likely to be a signal, but we will go ahead and start the process of deciding, is B an option and what does it look like?
How does that signal, though, on 5600 solve this problem of the parking in this lot if we can't get to that road from the
because
east?
when you have a very long section of road without a stop with that much traffic, it just, you end up not having any space. And so we have a lot of people that are trying to make a left-hand turn out of this current parking lot, and there's just no gaps. And what a signal does is it creates those gaps. And so there will be more gaps that people will be able to get in and out more, even making a left-hand turn to get in and a left turn to get out. So it does create the gaps to provide better access.
And what's the chance of getting that light on 5600? I mean, they've studied it for a while.
Well, they've studied it. The warrant study still is not there. My personal opinion is when they build it, the traffic will come. People don't go there because they know it's hard to get across.
Right.
And so the volumes will never be there, but other warrants will slowly warrant that. And it is on the radar. I've talked to UDOT, and they're aware of it. They're planning for it in the future. So it's just very far down on the list of priorities.
So Scott, as we look at option A, which is going to 5600, we have a water line in there with a lease agreement. And so as they're trying to expand, I would assume they'd have to keep a 30-foot gap no matter what in their expansion.
Correct. We're always going to have access there. We maintain the entire park, and so we mow it.
The lease agreement covers the park, not necessarily the line, right?
You know what? Is that correct?
That's correct. The lease agreement only addresses the park. We haven't been able to find anything yet that addresses the water line.
But we've been able to verify we have a water, and it's a PI line going out to 5600, correct?
Yes, and it's,
We rarely use it.
we don't ever use, yeah.
No, we use it all the time. We need maybe 50 feet now. That's not our story.
So it's an it is an emergency line. So we have the ability with well number 5 to put it into culinary or remove that section of pipe, turn it, and put it into pressurized irrigation if we ever needed to. So that is the purpose of that.
So with that, I assume that when you talk to Utah Power, they're aware that we have a water line there, that there must be some historical easement agreement. Maybe we need to ask them for it. I've always thought that even if we had to move the road on top of that water line, that might be our best ask for 5600. To me, the best is 5600. To get them out, I think, is...
The water line is actually probably, where we currently show option A, the water line is about 30 to 40 feet south.
Yeah, and I figure you might have to come and have it curve and go down. I'm just saying if that would be the easiest ask, saying we've got currently a water line, we already have an easement there, we'd like to build a road on top of that easement. And that's just a thought process.
Yep. And we're going to, whoever my successor is, this will be passed along, and we'll keep going down these avenues to try to find a solution, so.
Was that part of the conversation? I mean, you mentioned you brought that up with them, that we did have a water line there?
Yes, so they're aware of it. I haven't been able to find, and
Staff hasn't either.
We haven't either. We'll
Find the
have to do a
easement,
title
so-
report to see if we have an easement, but.
And then I noticed that when I looked at the plat, Utah Power owns some, but as it gets close to the road, it is UDOT that owns part of that ground. It's not all Utah Power.
to SR 92?
On 5600. When you look at the plat map.
Correct.
You still have to-
UDOT owns part of there.
Yeah, so it's,
Bought a bunch of right-of-way when they did 92 expansion.
so just a FYI, that was when I was looking at things.
Okay.
And then this now comes up as we look at option B coming off, and I think Brittany's asked a lot of questions about the right in, right out. That is city property, correct?
Correct. Yeah, we own 36 feet of property, and it's always been there for our access to our well.
Okay, the 36 feet, is that, we're maintaining 36 feet even if we sell this parcel, this little portion to?
No, so if the little piece would be sold, that's obviously coming out of the 36 feet.
How much of that, what's the width?
I think it was 6 feet, 6 or 7 feet that they were asking for.
If you can read that, you're good.
Is anyone, can you read that?
I got trifocals.
See if I can zoom in.
You can see the green is 36 feet wide, and the red is what they're asking for. So it leaves us between 24 and 30 feet, somewhere in there.
Would that be enough for that drive access to be safe, to be able to have two cars pass each other?
So yes, a current access road would be a minimum of 24 feet. Now, once you get out wider, then you could widen it to 36, so you could have a left hand, but I don't think there's any chance that UDOT would allow us to give a left-hand turn. So easily enough room for a right in, right out. So.
Todd, what do you think is other solutions here? I mean, as we're looking to sell this ground, is there concerns in selling this that, we need to be careful that eliminate or limits what we can do in the future if we do get things approved?
It doesn't limit the city's ability to access our well. That is what this property was intended for. The 36 feet, even if you sell off 12 of it, and I don't think they're asking for 12, 24 feet is substantially enough to access our well. My concern is just making sure that in the future we have some secondary access into this commercial area, because it is becoming a safety issue.
And actually, it is 12 feet that we're from the building. That's why I'm just.
Well, I don't think it's 12 feet from the building, but that's, a portion of that is their property.
Just looking at it.
So I think it might be more
It's
like
the 12, and then you
8.
subtract like 4 feet
Yeah.
from
Okay,
the
so about
building.
8.
It's probably 8 feet, 7 or 8 feet that they're asking for.
For the drive-through.
Correct.
And then I noticed when I went and visited here, we had some of our workers dumping, what I mean by dumping, they were storing some if it be gravel or something there over in this green area that you have up on the map.
They were storing what?
Well, there's some bins like.
Yeah, there's bins there.
And those are our old bins, but what was it?
It said Highland City, it was dump trucks, they came,
Yeah.
Brittany, am I thinking right? And they dumped gravel in those bins.
Those are our bins, and they are on our property.
Is that going to be, do we need to access those, or is that something we can move elsewhere, or?
Yes, we definitely would move those elsewhere in the future, if and when we got an access. The access is much more important than our ability to store something there. We have other locations we can store, it's just we've had those bins for many, many years, and so we use them on occasion. It's not all the time.
It's just unusual, when we're there, all of a sudden they
Yep.
come dump and.
So my question still becomes, how long, I mean, it looks like there's a possibility with Rocky Mountain, but probably not. But how long would it take to get some sort of agreement with UDOT? Because I'm still apprehensive about approving this without knowing we're going to have access.
Well,
The building's going to go in whether we approve this
Well, I know
or
the
not.
building's going in, but we've been talking about property for the drive-through.
yeah.
Yes.
And I understand why they want it, and I support the project. It's just, I really think we need access here. I think it's going to be a problem.
Agreed, Scott. I think for now, we need to look at it as a city, that we currently use this to access our well. That won't change. I think having a building there, I hope that we're able to restrict access a little bit better here than because we've put barricades up, they've put barricades up, they disappear, people drive through here. I would like to get something permanent. How long that's going to take, I have no idea. Working with Rocky Mountain Power is a very long process. UDOT, I believe we can get that approved sooner than later, or denied sooner than later. I think that the council should look at this and say, does it stand alone on its own merit? And we will continue as a city to try to fix the access. So I wouldn't base a decision on, are we going to get option A or option B? I would say that you need to just approve this based on its own merit, and we will continue as a city to get one of these accesses approved.
But if we don't get either A or B, then have we created a traffic problem here? I mean,
I guess what I want to know is what Scott's saying, what percentage increase of traffic will you get with the drive-through? If you usually get about, 30% more customers coming with the drive-through, how many is that per hour?
That is going to
And
be
then
a
we decide.
question for the applicant, not the city engineer.
Yeah.
But
You know everything,
Yes.
Todd.
isn't it true that this is your last meeting?
It is.
So if we ask you questions indefinitely,
You can say whatever.
I mean, it's a strategy.
So I truly believe that WPI has been a good neighbor for the city for many years. I believe that there are traffic issues with this site, and I believe they will always exist because it is kind of a different layout, and accesses on UDOT are becoming harder and harder to get. So I don't think we're going to fix the problems all at once. What I'm saying is that we as a city should continue to try to solve the problem, but not hold up a development for it.
Mayor, some of my questions have to do maybe with some legality, and so, Rob, just if you could help out. Underneath here, it says, as one, that could be part of a stipulation, it's in the purchase agreement that the certificate of occupancy for the pad will not be issued without the first having buyer and seller, so buyers, WPI, sellers, Highland City, brought to a resolution an application with UDOT for access or with Rocky Mountain Power for access across its land. What does that mean when you say that there has to be a resolution? What would trigger that resolution?
My interpretation of that would be we have contacted both UDOT and Rocky Mountain Power, have asked them for it, and either they say, yes, we're working on it, or no, we won't allow it. Because either way, that's a resolution.
So if they say we're working on it, that's a resolution. I guess to me, a resolution is no or yes, that
Well,
resolved
yes.
the situation.
Maybe
Am I thinking right?
I wasn't clear. I meant working on it meaning we are good to move forward with this. You are allowed to build this road. That would be the resolution. We'll consider it for some time is not a resolution.
Okay.
But if they say no, that's a resolution too.
It is a resolution. If Rocky Mountain Power says, in no event will we allow this road, we don't want it,
And UDOT says the same.
and if UDOT says the same, that resolves both of it. There's no access for either point.
If we ask them, is there ever a chance, and they say there's a possibility, then it's not resolved. Just, never mind, there's a chance. But then I saw it now, in another agreement, I thought we had down that there was an agreement about if one of these two roads went in, that WPI agreed to install and maintain these roads, but I noticed there's nothing in this agreement here, which I thought was in 2 weeks ago. We had part of our agreement that they were supposed to, if we got agreed from Mountain Power, Utah Power, or the UDOT, that they would agree to pay for the installation of the road, bear the cost of it, and then they also would bear the cost of maintaining that for the life of either of those roads. Was that not, am I thinking wrong? Did I not see something like that 2 weeks ago?
The agreement does say they will
Yes.
fully improve the road.
But that's not in our purchase agreement.
It is very last
Number
couple of
8.
sentences.
Kurt, number 8,
Number 8, let me just see.
is it number 8?
Look up myself.
No,
okay.
it's not number 8, it's,
All right, so under the new paragraph that got added, this is 4B. Buyer agrees that it will improve and undertake all improvements on and for the access at its expense if procured.
Okay. Do we need, with this agreement of occupancy, where's that in the agreement? Does that need to be added?
The purchase agreement, that's 4B that talks about the occupancy not being granted until this is resolved. Buyer agrees that a certificate of occupancy on its adjacent pad that uses the property will not be issued by seller without first having buyer and seller brought to resolution and application, et cetera, et cetera. And then later on, buyer agrees that it will improve and undertake all improvements on and for the access at its expense if procured.
Okay.
And that survives closing, so it'll survive if this is approved. And
It does survive closing, though. That's a lot of times after the property's closed, I guess, does it say it survived these?
it specifically says it survives closing, so if this does get approved, that provision survives after the deed is signed.
So we don't need to put anything on the deed to make sure we don't want to mess up their deed. I'm just saying it's.
Yeah, we don't want anything. This handles that.
Okay.
Any other questions for me? Oh, great.
I have some questions for the representative WPI, if I could, unless other people, I hate to monopolize things.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, in our last meetings or previous meetings, your engineer has kind of shown different ways to get traffic flow through here. So I guess my assumption is, and I'm usually an optimist, but I'm kind of a pessimist on whether we're going to get access off SR 92 or 5600. So do you really feel like if we don't get access and you have, and we approve the surplus, so you have your drive-through and different things, do you feel like you have a good plan to address the traffic flow in there? Because my concern is, I'm 100% for your project. I appreciate commercial development in the city. We like the direct sales tax. This, I guess the funds from this will go into the culinary water system. But I am worried about, negatively impacting Myers. And I just think this has the potential of doing that. And I kind of hate to bring one business in that negatively impacts another. And my impression, and I'm just pretty frank sometimes, but my impression is there's not a lot of love lost between Myers and WPI. I don't know, maybe that's just my impression. But do you have a good plan? Because I'm afraid these things are not going to happen, these accesses. What's your plan? Because I've seen different things, but I don't think I've understood it too well.
Is there a pointer or something I could use, Ken? Council members up the front who won't be able to see the pointer per se, but one of the things, you're right, Ryan Hales with Hales Engineering helped us review prior to our meeting last time the site in terms of its merits in and of itself, so with or without access, or this third access, or we're referring to in this meeting the secondary access. And some of the things that you can note is that the main drive, if we sort of cut this off, the main drive is sort of clearly identifiable and has access to off-site corridors. Okay, so we have this one coming in from SR 92, curving around. We also have the one that you're referring to, Councilman, in front of Myers. Now, that's important to recognize because the individual parcels, in terms of secondary framework, also all of them independently have access to those main drive aisles. And not only do they independently have access to the main drive aisles, but they have more than one access to the drive aisles. Now, that wasn't the case prior to us looking at the Wendy's and reconfiguring or proposing that we reconfigure the Wendy's south end of the property. And what I mean by each parcel has an access, we look at this parcel here and we look at the drive, we have multiple drive aisles to a main drive. Wendy's now has multiple drive aisles or accesses to the main drive. We look at the what we'll call the Fizz building. There's multiple accesses to the main drives, and similarly for the new building, there's multiple accesses to the main drive, meaning you can't go in one drive aisle and get stuck and coming back to the main drive. Furthermore, the consideration then came down to the drive-throughs. Each of the drive-throughs, and in the case of Myers Meats, is this sort of, let's just look at as the back of house. Each of those are as far away from each other and from the main drive aisles as is possible. Okay, and so those sort of main site development, site design principles apply to the site here, allowing for maximum opportunity to get in and out of the project. Similarly, there are accesses to the main corridors here. We do have two. You know, this one down here isn't as utilized as much, but is equally available. There is absolute, I think, consensus, even with our group, that a third access would clearly improve things. However, we don't believe, Councilman, that that's a necessary factor or consideration in terms of the building, or particularly in this case, the drive aisle. We recognize that in the last meeting, it seemed like the consensus or the discussion in terms of the surplus land surrounded, whether we can get access, and I can only assume that that is to sort of handcuff the developer, if you will, into taking action, or as much action as can be taken, to be able to support the process with UDOT and or Rocky Mountain Power. The way that we've been able to address that is just to say, hey, we can't issue a building permit without having followed through on those kind of commitments. Now, we do lose the urgency, or I guess I should say as an additional backdrop. The building can move forward with or without the drive-through, yes, but it does forever, or at least for a good decade, about a 10-year financing period, lock in what the building is with or without the drive-through. So even if access were to occur at some point in the future and the drive-through was enabled here in the future, at that point we don't have the tenant to be able to support the drive-through. It's not that kind of business at that point in time. Also, the financing and other kinds of things makes it a lot more difficult to change the characteristics of that building partway through one of those kind of financing periods. And so once we sort of establish that, we do get locked in. Furthermore, currently I'm sure you're all aware of the rising prices in construction. And so as of about 20 days ago or so, we did lock in with our builder pricing surrounding that, need to be able to deliver on an executed contract. Here he was in our office actually just this afternoon updating us that next week certain prices in certain categories are yet rising again. It's sort of a common theme in the industry, but we do fear that here in the future, again, similarly, if we lock in, once we lock in that building, that we may not, let's say a couple months from now, be able to meet the market parameters balancing between rent and construction costs. Now that's not the council's problem, that's our problem as developers. But we do look at this as kind of if our hands are tied and we're looking to see these commitments through, and furthermore, I should say we've already engaged Ryan Hales with Hales Engineering to approach UDOT. So since our last meeting, that process has started. His belief is that it will be up to about 90 days to work through to a conclusion with UDOT, is what he's saying. So 60 to 90 days, but we'll just say, 90 days. At which point in time, we'll be able to know whether this will or won't work for UDOT. We did try in the past, the left in is what we had approached UDOT for in the past. That's where we sort of stalled out in our previous application, let's just say 18 months ago or so. It was also, while it was a little bit hand in hand with the city, it was a little bit more pro-developer in terms of the approach to UDOT. The discussion now with staff and the city is, while it's at the developer's expense, engaging the engineer, it will be a lot more hand in hand, and perhaps when we're sitting in the meeting, it might be even the city taking a little bit more of a forefront push with UDOT to help make the case and see that through. But in all those kind of considerations, I think we at least view it similarly to Todd, your engineer, where the consideration tonight is really limited to does the incremental piece for the drive-through work or not. The council member Rodell here posed the question of number of cars through the drive-through per hour. Our calculation, which may or may not be accurate or exact, I should say, came down to about 6 cars an hour is what makes the difference, and that's average, that's not peak times. 6 cars an hour is what would be going through that drive-through on a 10-hour day operating basis.
And this is with the tenant you have in mind?
This is with the tenant we have in mind. Now, I should also note that, and I think as stated previously in meetings, I know there's traffic concerns, but we have provided 2 times the city required parking in the site. We've also provided about 27% more stacking capability in this building than industry standards. The city doesn't quite have a stated standard for drive-throughs. And so we do believe that all caution and all precautions have been taken to address the traffic issues. I was on the phone this afternoon with Fizz, we were having a discussion, or with the Fizz owners, having a discussion about the commitments on landlord and tenant side to follow through with some of our previously stated issues in managing the traffic on that site. And I think to address your answer, perhaps there isn't an ideal or exact solution to 100% of the issues here. Time will tell. However, we do believe that all issues have been explored, all commitments are being followed through with, and there's not too much more we can do than to bind ourselves by saying a certificate of occupancy can't be issued to those till we bring to resolution those issues. And we're just talking about the incremental drive-through component here. Again, with the building moving forward, we also have the, in terms of sales tax, we recognize its increment is obviously important, but the drive-through tenants do command more sales and also help to command more food-oriented sales in the building. Approximately anywhere between $600 and $700 per square foot is what we're recording on our shopping centres for our food tenants, as opposed to soft goods is somewhere, around $400 a square foot. So in terms of sales tax increment for the city, that does sort of make a material difference. We believe it's material. It is a smaller building, but it's there. In addition, once or drive-throughs help to drive demand for other food in the building, as opposed to perhaps no drive-through, and then it might be a little bit more just straight soft good retail, and so that helps, I think, sway some of the city's benefit at least. And again, we sort of get locked in from a pricing standpoint with today's construction costs, but also with financing and banks and everything that makes it hard to change midway through some of these periods of time.
So are you going to do traffic mitigating things? I mean, obviously we designed this, but you're going to put up like speed signs and, I can see someone getting their food or whatever it is from the drive-through and then whipping around in front of some of the other business. You're going to try to control that with a sign or stop signs. I mean, if you drive in front of Macy's, there's a stop sign there which allows people that come from their parking lot to go into their building. And we have to stop there, but I'm just wondering if there's going to be any sort of traffic mitigating things. Yeah, I mean, if you got 6 cars an hour, that's not a lot, but you may have one steady stream to it, depending on what your business is.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so let me run through just briefly, and you may recall some of the previous steps we're taking, that we will be taking when we're building this building, and then I'll talk through future mitigation possibilities. We will be putting in sort of the no entry signs, as well as additional sort of directional for parking to help address Myers customers in this field so they don't get caught out here. Myers does have some parking on this side, I think, along with their handicappers on that side as well. Additionally, we tend to find that people park in proximity to the entrance of the buildings, which is what we've stated before, but entrance or proximity to the buildings would be in this half of the field as opposed to the back half of the field, where perhaps stacking potentially, if that were ever to sort of become a problem again, would conflict with those consumers. So we think that that's also sort of naturally safeguarded. But with the Fizz putting out, they're spending $1,800 on signs as we speak to help direct the traffic on their behalf. In addition, we'll be putting in the stop signs here, and do not enter signs here, as well as some striping in the meantime to help direct traffic. Now that's sort of the immediate now issues, well, in addition to the change of the parking field over here, which will only help perhaps with Wendy's and other things, but perhaps give a little bit more direction on other paths consumers can take. Now, concerning what happens if things occur in the future, in a small site like this, and it is relatively small in comparison as opposed to Macy's, or you go down to American Fork, yes, you often do see, or the Smith Center over to our west, you often do see stop signs and caution signs with the little blinking LED lights on the solar panels there in front of entrances to grocery centers, and those are clearly options as we go down the road. However, on small sites, as there's too many signs, too many directions can get a little bit confusing as we try and establish those patterns. You talk about no love lost between Marsh and us. There's no, we didn't ever intend to convey any kind of animosity between Myers Meats and ourselves. We have a very good working relationship. We always have. These issues do arise. They come up. They get worked out between property owners. There's ample communication flow. I call Marsh on the cell phone, he answers, calls me back, vice versa. There's fluid communication. There's not an avoidance of issues. Marsh, I'm sure, as you're aware, is more than willing to reach out if something's wrong. And we've addressed or done our best to address that over the last year as conflicts has occurred, as well as trying to manage our tenants better in terms of the community as a whole. And so, again, just to come back to your question there about what could be done here, you're right, 6 cars an hour doesn't sound like a lot on the average, but if it does become a stream and become a problem, then we will have to take further mitigating steps, which point we communicate with Ryan Hales a lot. He's our preferred traffic engineer, and help to come up with other solutions in conjunction with the adjacent property owner. The properties, even though this one doesn't have property lines, the property line between our entity and Marsh Myers property is straight down the middle of the drive aisle. And so it takes cooperation. That's intentional. It creates cooperation or requires cooperation between the parties in order to solve any kind of traffic issues. And also when you kind of get a lot of love loss or a lot of sort of contention between, perhaps warring property owners, which we're not even close to that stage. It safeguards against one property owner taking advantage of the other property owner by cutting off their access. And so it was sort of designed intentionally that way. There's also sort of underlying covenants that describe how the properties interact and work with each other, that sort of everyone agrees and signs on at the time. And as new problems arise, you address them, just like perhaps new traffic issues. And so there are still, like you said, the blinking lights or some other mitigation that we could take perhaps with the drive-through tenant at that point in time, like we have done with Fizz for the stacking issues. Again, perfect solution, perhaps not, but we really feel after consulting everyone and talking with all the parties, it really is the best solution under the circumstances. And again, so just to reiterate, there's still options on the table, but we don't, and the traffic engineers, and I think even in coordination with your own staff, there was a couple of additional things that we had proposed with staff's recommendation actually took them off. They said it's just too much. But again, so working with everyone, we can provide additional components here in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion?
So when I came in, I was leaning towards maybe not approving the purchase because I was worried about the traffic, but I was thinking about the question of if we assume there will never be access to 92, would that be the reason to not approve this? And if you go back to the picture of the way it's all configured, it almost seems like having that drive-through is another way for cars to get out and around the building, whereas if they're just in that parking lot and there's not a drive-through, they're all just backing up and going through that same exit and entry. So kind of thinking about that, and I think there will be times during the day when it stacks, but I think that, so I don't think it's really fair to say just 6 cars an hour, because there will be times when there are a lot more. But I do think the problem with Fizz is going to get better now, and I understand the need for drive-throughs. So I guess I am leaning more towards feeling like it's almost safer and better to have that other way for cars to circle the building.
I agree with you, Brittany. We know the building's going to be there. Traffic will slightly increase, 6 cars per hour, higher in peak. Nathan, my question for you is, how many drive-throughs do we have here in Highland? Restaurants, drive-through fast food?
Give me a minute, I can count them.
I think it's
Circle,
3.
3.
Three.
Circle, Wendy's.
Yeah,
And,
I'll say 3 because I know drive-throughs a lot. And I've actually been taking pictures of myself in all the drive-throughs this week, quite a few. Inevitably, there is going to be traffic. I was backed up at Swig in St. George onto their main street. It's how it always is. People keep coming. And I think residents, this is one thing that they do want in Highland, is more restaurants, more drive-throughs. And I don't want to be the one to say no to it based on would we possibly not get access.
I don't have a vote, but I agree with Kim and Brittany on this. And I am hopeful, and I remain hopeful on Rocky Mountain Power. I keep going in my mind how this could be sold, and I think there are things we can do that we haven't done yet, that hasn't been time to do yet. But anyway, I'm more hopeful on that because I think that's a better solution in the long term.
I agree.
So you have my commitment that I'll be doing what I can to work with Rocky Mountain Power so that they know that we would consider this a win-win for both parties if we can go this route. So it doesn't mean anything other than I will try my dangest.
Well, I think it's important for people to understand that we have an obligation to let them use the property, as it's zoned and as they own it. And so it's not really a question of can they build this building here. They're going to build the building here. It's a matter of how do we make it the most beneficial for the community.
And I would agree on the traffic, and then there's going to be increased revenue to the city.
So Mayor, as I look at this, this is not probably going to be traditionally a fast food retailer that comes in this, and so this won't be a fast drive-through. And so I look at it, for me, like a Costa Vida drive-through. And if I looked at Costa Vida, I'm going, I would assume I might be faster to go in to get the meal than to sit in the drive-through. Now, I don't know the user. We've had a lot of residents ask for, restaurants, that's probably the highest retailer. They keep asking us, can you get us some restaurants here? Now naturally, if they put an American burger there, for instance, there might be a heavier drive-through. A Fizz, who would have thought that was going to, bring the type of traffic? So it can change with the type of retailer that's in there. But, maybe if, the vision is if they can do some pickup in front where they have an app or they have a call ahead, they can, get things. Some of it can be the tenants that can kind of help with movement. I did look today, it was interesting, that in that parking lot that has 44 parking spaces, 14 cars were already parking there. And I was going, and I try to watch to see if they were coming from Myers or, one of the concerns, I appreciate WPI thinking and having double parking, because one of my main concerns is the parking. If we do the backup, that's going to be hard for cars to move in, and not just move in and out, but you can't get out of your parking spaces. And so I'm hoping the flow that this will, if we can get the access, I think it will solve things. But I also, what's mentioned, we have a property owner. I think there's some rights they have. Now, we're selling the property that would allow for the drive-through, but I look that would probably benefit the residents of Highland. So with that, I'm ready to make a motion.
Go ahead.
I move that the city...
Excuse me, we do need to have a public hearing.
Sorry. This is
Thank you.
public hearing. Thank you. Good catch. All right, public hearing, open. Any comments from residents here, or I should say resident? Oh yeah, Helene's there, sorry. Thank you for coming, Helene.
And there's no one online.
Online, okay, public hearing is closed. Now a motion would be in order.
Mayor, I move that the City Council approve the purchase contract with WPI agreeing to sell 2,433 square feet to WPI for commercial retail building.
I'll second it.
Motion by Kurt, second by Scott. We're starting with Scott.
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Tim? Brittany?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
That passes unanimous. Next item. You're welcome. As these guys keep leaving, I keep wanting to say, you can leave, but you have to get ice cream first, right? That worked last time.
Don't do that anymore.
That sounds good to
I might
me.
have given you a line. I really appreciate the last time that happened. Okay, ordinance number 6, municipal code amendment, nuisances. Kelly?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. This is a request by staff for this municipal code amendment. Because it is a municipal code amendment, there's no public hearing. And eventually, so currently with nuisances and decibel levels, we do have some set in the commercial zones and the development code. And then in the municipal code, there is what you see in the staff report with the proposed amendment or with the existing amendment, where it's just very vague and just saying that what is not permitted is what is seen as objectionable or bothersome in regards to noise. And so we decided to amend the municipal code and put all of the decibel levels specifically in the municipal code, and then after the council comes to a conclusion on that, we will go forward and amend the development code to match it and reference to the section of the municipal code for the specific decibel levels in these zones. Basically, this is the proposed amendment. If I do not explain this clearly, Rob is the one that taught me it because I have a hard time understanding the science behind decibels or measuring decibels. So I will not be offended if you do not understand. But it is separated into 3 types of properties. And type A is just a basic residential property, like a residential home in a residential zone. And okay, how do I explain this? So the ambient sound, and this is a definition that's also provided in the proposed amendment, ambient sound is basically the average overall sound of a certain area. And you can measure that by just basically taking different measurements at different times of the day for a couple weeks or something like that, and then have this average sound. And so if you have this quieter neighborhood, it could possibly be 30 decibels, and then another one could be 40 decibels, and then another one 50, just for example. And so with this 10 above ambient sound, it's saying in this quiet neighborhood of 30 decibels, this noise cannot exceed 10 over that ambient sound, and so it cannot exceed 40. And then if this other neighborhood has 40, the sound cannot exceed 50, but then it's putting a max level at 60 decibels. And so that's how it is for all of them. At nighttime, it switches to just 5 above at ambient sound, so it's just lowering the standard of error, essentially, or room that they have to exceed over the average sound. So hopefully that explains it kind of. There are also examples in the staff report for, basically I just looked up on Google, like relative decibel levels and things that we can compare them to, and that's what's included in the staff report, just so you kind of have an idea of what 60 decibels is or what 65 is, et cetera. A type B property is a conditional use in a residential zone, and so that's like churches or schools, or actually omit schools, but just anything that receives a conditional use permit in a residential zone is type B property. And that is 65 decibels or 10 above ambient sound, and then 55 for the max during the nighttime hours. And then type C is just commercial in general. This would be the same for all commercial zones, and that is 70 decibels or 10 above ambient sound, and then 60 at nighttime. And just to clarify the definitions for daytime and nighttime, it becomes nighttime at 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., and then that's when the daytime hours start. There was something else that I was going to clarify.
So this is at the receiving end.
That's what I was just going to say, yes. It would be measured from the receiving property. I won't really go into that anyways.
So it's not where it's generated. It's
that
at
is
the
correct. It
receiving
would be
end.
measured from the receiving property. It's not in the development code. There is one commercial zone that specifies at the source, and then no other commercial zones specify where it needs to be measured from. And so this is just clarifying that it would be measured from the receiving property among all nuisance. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's where, when it comes to enforcing it, basically what we would have to do is we'd have to get that measurement of the ambient sound, and then if there was some event or something happening that is not recognized as exempt from these decibel levels, we would say the event was going on for like 3 hours. We would have to take like 2 or 3 measurements throughout it, maybe get an average decibel level of this, so then we'd be able to have proof that it exceeded that 10 decibel levels.
And I tell my child to come in because my voice is 60 decibels, then I've just created a violation, and I'm gonna get cuffed and take my.
It's at your neighbor's house. So like if he's in his house,
Here's me say, hey, come on in, it's 10 o'clock. I've created a violation because of a one-time human voice. This just seems very random and strange to me.
Tim?
70 decibels, television set on loud, or a vacuum cleaner. So if I'm a neat freak.
Yeah, you do need to turn on your mic.
Tim, speaking of decibels, would you turn on your mic and put it close to your face? Thank you.
I've got a big mouth, I don't need the.
Thank
Oh,
you.
you're at 80 now.
Yeah, so am I gonna get a violation right now? Because I'm probably at
Yes.
80 decibels right now.
so
So I wanna know if it's an instantaneous measurement, if it's averaged over time, and then who's going to enforce this? We're gonna have someone going around with a decibel meter saying, ooh, look at my neighbors are talking loudly in their backyard.
Right. This would go just like any of our other code enforcing processes, is where we would generally base it off of when we receive complaints. And so if we receive a complaint that something is constantly happening, that's when we will move forward. There are different options. There is like decibel readers that we can hire out pretty inexpensively to get someone else to do the decibel reading, or we can invest in a decibel reader as staff and do that. But that's something that we could discuss moving forward. Do you have something?
Are there any problems with this any place else in the city, or are we mostly talking right now? I mean, I know we're writing code for the entire city, but are we mostly talking about a problem in one place or other places also?
We did have this issue a little, well, we actually looked into amending this piece of the code before recently, before as
there
of
was the
recent. I don't know
motorcycle
however that
motocross.
Oh, that's right, there was.
Right, and there's also the Burt Brothers Lube Center that was approved as a conditional use that is also, it's in the town center overlay, and that's where it specifies 65 decibel max measured at the source. But then we have like automobile service that's a conditional use, which is a permitted use in that zone, and so they just really don't align really with what's permitted decibel level wise and our permitted uses. Yes, Tim?
Something else is the exemptions. So you see temporary short-term use of equipment for construction, maintenance, or cleaning. The one thing that really should be, have some oversight is our construction sites, and that's listed under an exemption?
The idea of it is being temporary or short-term,
I
that's
see
the
it all the
thing.
time where there's construction sites where they're there too early or they're there too late, and it's definitely over, maybe not my voice, but a typical speaking voice, it's well over that. So, and it's not just a backfire or something, it's loud hammering or heavy equipment, and
Right.
why
Which
would
usually,
why would there be an exemption for them?
when me and Rob talked about this with that wording, the intent was kind of like with people's lawn mowers or leaf blowers. You're not going to tell them that they can't maintain their own yard. But when it does come to construction, usually with construction companies and builders, we do ask them to stay in those daytime hours, which, Rob, I don't know if
Is
you
there
want to think
separate
about rewording it. I don't-
regulations around construction and 7 to 10?
For hours of operation, yeah.
Right, but they don't keep to that. I'm just saying, I used to hear it all the time, starting at 6 in the morning. And
Which is when the hours of operation begin.
it starts at 6?
6 a.m. to midnight.
For construction?
Oh, for construction, it's, okay, I didn't know
Yeah,
that it was
it's not-
different for construction,
It's 7 to 10, right?
for quiet time.
So if you're hearing that, then you should be calling Kelly and saying there's a problem.
Get out there with your decimal meter.
Call me next time, Tim.
Well, that's not even a decibel meter thing, that's just you're doing construction when you're not supposed to.
Right,
So
that's true.
I did, just if anybody's curious, I did download an app on my phone and turned it on when I was watching TV, and for me, it was around 60 decibels when I was watching TV in the house, and I started thinking, if I heard that level of noise coming from
Another
a
property.
neighbor in my house that I wasn't interested in listening to, that would be a problem.
So it would be 60 decibels in your house or the origin of the
No,
sound?
no, it's
Your house.
in my house. So,
Yeah, that would be loud. It
That-
would have to be very loud at the
Right.
source.
yeah, it's not at the source, but it's 10 above or 5 above the ambient sound, so it could be lower than that. That's just the max, right? But I just out of curiosity did that, and it was a free app, so I know we have low-quality information that we can get off our phone for free, and I did look at Amazon on pricing for decibel meters, and ones that were really highly rated were $21. That was the highest rated one. But the price went up to $100. So it's not for the city to buy some or maybe even give to the police to have. So if they get a call about a party or whatever, they can use that as a citing tool.
It just seems that we needed to tighten up the exemptions, the regulations, and so we're not infringing upon people's rights, and at the same time protecting everyone else's rights against having too much noise. So it just seems like there needs to be some,
So what would you tighten up on the exemptions?
well, I mean, exemptions for construction. What does that mean? I don't know what that means. I don't know.
Rob, do you want to, because Rob is
Is
the
this
author.
just an overview and it's not the actual language?
Yeah, that's not the actual code. I did shorten a couple of them up,
But that is.
just for the
what-
slide.
More or less.
That is what it
proposed.
says, okay.
I mean, here's the thing, construction's loud. If someone's building a house or a commercial site or something, it's going to be loud, and we have to allow that because we want people to build. You know, you get roofers out there or whatever. Maybe we could tighten it up by saying, rather than a full-blown exemption, it's an exemption for daytime hours only. So then you keep that
Correct.
7 to 10. Because right now, I think it's a little looser than that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good change. Now, we have code elsewhere that says 7 to 10 is when you can do construction projects, right, Nathan?
Well, 10 o'clock seems pretty late, but
Well, no, and I think, one thing that Tim brought up is consistency. You know, we're talking, if we measure at one time, there's a sound that's loud out for, let's say, a 10-second period versus a consistent, that noise is there for consistent for 5 minutes is different. And Mayor, you mentioned inside, I guess it would be at the point, if someone's in their backyard and they can hear it, that's where it would also be measured at.
Right.
it's just in my business, there's instantaneous measurements, like a snapshot, and there's also average over time. And I think that needs to be distinguished also.
Is that,
Anytime you do code enforcement, you're looking at what a reasonable person, right, would do. So you're not, we're never trying to go out there with a sledgehammer and hit somebody over the head. That's not our goal or our intent.
But if you did that, that would exceed the
Right.
decibel level.
Yes, exactly. So that would not be good. So what we're looking at is events or things that become intrusive or
It's repetitive, maybe.
repetitive or things like that that become a true impact on a reasonable person, right? So, for example, we've done issues with roosters, or we've done issues with air conditioners. Well, air conditioners, that's a standard residential area that you deal with. We talk about construction. Well, we have to build roads, or we have to repair sewer lines. We have to do those type of things. So those are things that we have to do. We talk about, a lot of times, we talked about drive-throughs, right? So squawking, boxes, you know, hey, can I take
Well,
the
no, we
order?
had a resident came and
So-
complained about Arctic
Right.
Circle being noisy, that they
box,
could
right.
hear it over where it's at, and that's a common business thing, and if they couldn't talk
Right.
to their customer, it hurts their drive-through.
So, I mean, going back to pneumatic wrenches, you know, that could be something a long time, or, you know, like a quick whack that has the loud vacuums and things like that. You're looking for a constant thing. You're not looking for that one-time event. You know, when a police officer goes out on a party, he's saying, okay, guys, come on, let's settle down and do it. Now, if he's going out every day at the same site, that's a different response,
But
right?
what about if we have a loud motorcycle coming down one of our streets? That would definitely break this noise ordinance, if you want to say, so the police could pull them over and give them a citation for that, if that was caught.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to catch those because usually it's just a one-off thing. But yeah, they could.
Well, there is a big violator we have here in Highland. I know there's been, but the Utah Department of Transportation is a big violator. I mean, anyone that lives close to SR 92, you can't carry a conversation if your house backs that. So, and I know we smile about it, but is this get something where we can also say, hey, UDOT, you're breaking our noise ordinance? And I mean, you know, but it's a concern for our residents.
Yeah, I mean, there's limits on what we can do with UDOT's property. I mean, we can't regulate them to some extent, and if you have a highway or a larger road, it's UDOT owns it and they allow it.
Kelly, did you have anything else? Because I had some questions, but were you finished?
Yes.
Fantastic. So, I mean, I guess one of the things that I'm thinking right now is we're talking about this general ordinance and all of these hypotheticals, which is great, except for I think this is really an issue right now because we're talking about one specific problem that we haven't actually talked about yet.
Though, to be fair, I did draft this several months before.
That's very true.
I believe it. I believe it. I just think as we're having our discussion, we need to think about one of the problems that we're trying to address. And also, Scott, if you want to come to my house for 2-Minute Tuesday, I have a kid who is consistently at 100 decibels all day, 24/7. So I think we need to think about that because construction is something where it's a temporary thing and eventually that building is going to be built, right? Like a car passes, but something like what some of the complaints that we've heard about Norton, that's not a situation where the construction's going to be done next week. I mean, it seems as if it's the plan to have that be an ongoing thing, so I think we have to address that.
Maybe that's something that I step down for and someone else comes up to the microphone.
No,
You're kidding me.
We just want to hear from Todd.
you will be talking at the end of our meetings going forward, though. We know that, right?
Yeah, so be nice to me when I come back on the other side. Okay. Tell me what the question was again.
I didn't think you would come.
Oh,
It just seems like we always ask you to solve all our problems.
I can't solve the noise, so. Really, there's nothing for me?
Here,
I should have
I'll
asked
change it to follow up on the, what you asked, what our current code. We use to do construction, what we use is our noise, and it says it's unlawful for any person or group to permit any noise regardless of its origin or definition that is so loud as to be objectionable and bothersome between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. That's where it comes from.
So let's go through enforceability. So, and I'll use myself as an example. We have a movie in the backyard going. It's now 10 o'clock. We didn't turn it off, and I have some teenagers, and we're still watching the movie. And so a call comes. How is this going to be enforced? The police officer would have to have a decibel meter. They'd go to the home of maybe the complainant. They would take the decibel reading, and it comes in at 75, and it's after 10, so then they could come and cite that homeowner because of the noise. Is that Is that how we see this going forth?
So I asked Rob to address this specifically.
Yes, they could. I think the police, as with a lot of things, would come up and say, hey guys, knock it off. The issue we have with the current code is what is an objectionable amount of noise is a standard I don't know how to define. And the police, when they do these kinds of things, they go and they're like, yeah, that seems loud to me. And I've had a lot of other cities that I've worked with try to enforce noise ordinances, and it's always an ad hoc thing where you just say, if it's bad, we can cite you for it, which, property owners don't know how to make that work for themselves. They don't know if you're, running a business or something, how can you know what is objectionable if you don't have a standard to apply it against? So in that situation, ideally, the police officer would come to your house and say, hey guys, it's after 10, knock it off, it's getting noisy, take it inside or somewhere else.
So now let's get down to what Brittany's talking about. Let's get the exact example, which we'll probably get calls on. Norton Performance has been doing dances on a Friday or Saturday or whatever it might be. We've had some residents that have been concerned by it, that have emailed council, come to council meetings. They now call the police. The police would go to their home, not Norton Performance, right? They'd go to the complaint's home to take the measurement?
Yes.
They take the decibel read. So they would go to one of those residents that called, and so they would take that. And then, what you're saying is first, a courtesy, maybe go over and say, hey, Norton, would you mind maybe now turning it down? It appears that you've gotten the decibel read at the point where we recorded, noticed it. Now, is that a policy that will give one warning? Is it once they get the second, then it's, tell me what, is it a citation that that they have to come to court on? What type of citation are we talking about?
So at that point, it's really up to the officer that responds to the scene. And just like when you're pulled over for speeding, and whether he gives you a ticket or not, that's up to the officer.
The city does have a general penalty for if something's made illegal. The officers can cite you for it, and there's the standard infraction amount. I think with code enforcement like this, the goal isn't to fine people, it's to get people to comply so
Right.
everyone works together. And I think, the city's police officers are good about that. But like with, speeding as a good example, you don't say, the first time you're speeding, we'll give you, your first one's free. But we all know, those of us who speed more than we should, sometimes we get off with a warning in order to encourage us to be better in the future. And I think the standard, and I won't speak for Norton, I'll allow them to speak for themselves, but ideally, this will help them understand this is how you're impacting your neighbors, and the neighbors can understand, all right, I'm entitled to a certain level of quietness or not, depending on what if you live near the large major roads here, the commercial area, you're going to have a noisier ambient that you're not entitled to as quiet as a neighborhood as you are, further up in the hills.
So that's my question.
Is what? Go ahead.
Well, my question is the neighbors that have been complaining, I think it's the Cornerstone neighborhood, but they live by probably one of the busiest intersections in the state of Utah that generates a lot of noise. So I'm not sure if they're complaining about Norton's, which it could be an issue. I don't live there. But I don't know how the police officer who comes with his decibel meter can sort out the noise from the corner and the noise from Norton's, because they're both very noisy. Do you see what I mean? I still don't know how we're going to enforce this.
Well, can I just make a comment?
Yeah.
This is a big improvement over what we have now. Now, what we have now is
Right.
very, very subjective. So this is is it perfect? Probably not.
But we're trying to
But it's-
quantitate it.
We're trying to make it quantitative so that there's less subjectivity to it. So this is, in my view, a big step forward for both, like Rob was saying, for the business owners or whomever is generating noise and the recipients of that noise. Now, in the case of Cornerstone, when your house is vibrating from base,
Right.
you know and that's not normal on a Saturday night at 10:30. It's definitely not the road.
Well, I'm just
So-
thinking we should have the meter over at Tim's house. all the time.
Yeah, well, we could.
I just don't know how that works.
Permanently
yeah.
install one.
But you could, though. We would, because we know this is an issue, ideally, the police would get a complaint, go check it out, maybe do a couple of readings at the property for that night.
Right.
Maybe go talk to Norton. The next night, they go out when there's not a dance, measure what the sound is normally. And maybe
Right.
it's not that big of a
So you
difference.
got to have a base. That's what I'm thinking about, yeah.
It was a different city, but someone complained about a bakery nearby had a big refrigerator that would turn on. Police officer went out and measured it, and it's like, it sounds a lot like the same level of noise that when, your neighbor's AC kicks on. Yeah, it's continuing, but it wasn't that much difference, so we couldn't enforce it for that reason. And we'd want the same kind of thing. You live near a street, there's a higher level of noise, and that's why we try to define it as above ambient to a maximum amount. So if your ambient's really low, great, you're in a quiet neighborhood, we can enforce that quietness. If you're in a noisier neighborhood, you don't have those same levels, but you do get a maximum protection.
So how do we handle, so here's a Burt Brothers situation, they have garages on both sides, and they've always, usually when it gets real hot in there, it's hard, and, so the summer, they usually open it up, and you're gonna hear those pneumatic tools going. So to me, here's a problem we've created in the city. We told when Tim Tire came, we will not allow you up on SR 92, you're a tire store, we want you to be into the town center. So they buy into that, they move it down to the town center. The city council now has approved condos right next to their back thing, and I'm going, we're gonna get some, I've been surprised we haven't had some complaints. I assume we'll hear some things. It's a permitted use, it's a use that's been there prior to that, and the city's kind of causing this noise issue. We have Norton Performance. They've come and they came and built there, and yet we let townhomes go right next to it. Where's the city's response? And we gotta protect the residents too, but I mean, we've kind of caused problems.
Currently, it's objectionable, right?
Wanted to have a debate about mixed-use zones and what goes in and what's in them, we'd be here another 2 hours, so.
I just think that this is something that basically is cleaning up language, is putting a quantitative, basically giving our code a quantitative, just something that we can set and say, okay, this is guidelines, this is how it works, this is the number, and we go from there. I mean, it's right now, you just can't follow it. And so this is our way of kind of cleaning it up, and,
If there's an issue, we can readdress if it comes up.
Yeah.
Yes.
And just to point out, there is a noise standard currently in a few of the zones. This is actually loosening the standards a little bit and making it easier to comply, ideally, for everyone.
And specifically for Burt Brothers, that's the case.
Yeah.
And they had a conditional use permit that specified noise was part of the conditional use permit that they agreed to.
Yes.
Can I ask you one more question before I know?
Before you bring Todd back up?
Oh my goodness.
Who's responsible for, say the dance is over at 11:30, I think I was told. Who's responsible then for the noise as those 100 whatever teenagers are packing up to go home and they're hanging out in the parking lot?
It's still the property owner, because it's still an event taking place on your property.
Even if their event is technically over?
I mean, unless they're kicking them off, then they become trespassers if they say you're supposed to get out of here at a certain time. I mean, if whatever is defined as the event is less important than what the event actually is.
That's important. 11:30 ends, they had been an invited guest inside the building. 11:30 comes, they now go outside to prepare to go home, but it's part of the event to get prepared to leave. If they're noisy, it's the business owner that has that, in a sense, that responsibility to try to maintain that noise. How long would that event go? How long does that go on for?
Yep, and it's supposed to clear out at a certain hour. I mean, you have business hours that close, and we can get into more details about that. But I mean, think of a lube facility. You have a bunch of cars. Maybe they're coming up and they're idling, with diesel or something that's loud. That's all part of the business, and it's part of this, the impact from the business on neighbors. So we expect the business owner to be responsible for that.
That'd be important for them to have maybe in their rental agreement about
and their
those
leasing
invited
agreement.
guests. Okay.
But in this situation, we have a use that is not what it was originally going to be, because I listened to all those meetings before I came here. So they're moving away from their primary use.
So we don't normally, but your hand was up a couple times. You need to come up to the,
I think it sounds like, in just talking to a couple of the officers after one of the dances, that it's more the bass than anything, is what it sounds like, is just the shaking. And I mean, I'm not in one of those houses. It sounds like your neighbors are, Mayorman, but I think that's what, what the major complaint is the bass. The music's loud, and it sounds like it's interesting to me where it's kicking, actually, the side that it's kicking to, instead of, it should be kicking to the bass.
Doesn't
on
matter,
it.
right?
Yeah,
It is where it is.
Yep.
It's irrelevant.
And so I think that's what it is. It's more than anything than the
All right.
sound.
What would your process be for if, so if those neighbors called the police and they came to your facility to talk to them to quiet things down, how would that happen? Because I can't quiet my 2 teenagers down. So what would that look like from your end?
Yeah. I invited you up, so you're stuck with that, sorry.
Yes. So on our end, and after, for me, just gathering some pieces, I wasn't at the last dance. I met with a couple of the council individuals, and I was actually in Atlanta, and so I wasn't there for that one. We have a staff member at every single dance, and that was the only one that I know that there was actually an officer there, because my staff wasn't approached any other time. But the process for me is just shut it down. It's simple. It's the same thing when people weren't we had a dance that, the individuals weren't trying to wear masks 2 months ago, and it's easy. Hey, you're done, you're out, you're off the premises, you broke our contract, we're done, and move on.
So Tim, do you provide the sound system, or do they bring a sound system in?
They bring a sound system in, is what is, because we rent the building to them, and they bring, in a sense, a DJ, and we've had 2 different DJs that I know, other than that, there hasn't been any outside DJs, just the 2 individuals.
And so you're recommending contractually, coming back to, Councilmember Bill's question, is that if there's a contractual issue after 10 where they haven't complied to bring it down and you're notified that there's a noise ordinance, you're prepared to tell that DJ, hey, you've now not kept to what the agreement was, and we need to shut the dance down.
Correct. And we had that probably about a month and a half ago. It was pretty loud, and they had opened the garage doors, and I told them at that point not to, just because. And so Sarah, who was there, and we can watch, myself and Ed could watch on the cameras and see everything and hear everything going on in the building. And so, we said, hey, if you don't turn it down, we're done. It's the same thing when the whole COVID deal hit. People weren't wearing masks at the front, and that was part of our policy. And I just said, hey, we're about to be done. And, and then they're like, okay. And so.
So Tim, now let's assume it's 10 o'clock, and let's just be realistic. You have the doors closed. What type of, I would assume they want to be at least at 80 to 100 decibels inside the building to be dancing. I mean, it's going to be hard. I guess you could do a lot of slow dances, but I'm just, what's kind of the estimation of what you're going to say, hey, inside decibel, what do you think, you could be before you, and then once you open it, that'd be a totally different thing, but.
I don't think I have an answer to that unless we had a decibel,
Well, that's where you would go.
Correct.
Maybe go over to where the residents that are complaining and say, okay, it's X here, it's Y there, then
And I want to test it at one of the dances, and Kelly and I, the first conversation I had with her was one of the things, is I wanted to test it, to be like, hey, what is this, and is this even reasonable? Is this something that we can even do that's even permittable going forward, or is this not going to work, period? And we want to make it work. It helps the business, and we canceled a couple dances, and I was told that I'm a bad person, and I'm ruining these kids' lives 2 weeks ago. So, we don't want to ruin any kids' lives, I guess.
We do that all the time here. Yeah, all the time. All the time.
We do worse than that, actually.
All the time.
Todd, can you fix that issue? No.
No, I was going to have Todd dance to all the different decibel levels of music. I would think, for me, I think it's great to add this code, and since that's what's on the agenda, I would be happy to talk about that. I would like to know, though, at some point, and I don't know if it's now or not now, but what you're planning on doing to help the issue from your end, because it sounds like you have plans, and I don't think you want to bother the resident. So, but that's not part of what we're doing here, right? We're just voting on this.
Correct.
Yeah, so I think we should do that.
Well, the problem is there are going to be a lot more residents. With 10,700, the rest of Highland Vista, all right there, so.
Yeah.
Well, and according to this, the noise level changes at 10 o'clock, right? And I don't think dances end at 10 o'clock, or at least my kids don't come home at 10 o'clock.
I also want to clarify, I have a little typo. The decibel level is correct in the report, and it's correct in the PowerPoint, but it is incorrect in the resolution. So it's 70 decibels for the type C property for daytime, and then 60 decibels for nighttime.
So when the motion's made, they can refer to the staff report and
Yes.
say the language there. And I would recommend that that Rob mentioned the construction language change, so that construction, the exemption only applies 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Are we ready for a motion?
Yes.
Okay, go Kim.
Okay, so I got to add some things then. I move that the city council accept the findings and approve the proposed amendment to section 816-100, nuisance of noise and light, based on the following findings. The amendment is consistent. The purpose of the section established in chapter 8-16 nuisances, and the proposed amendment is consistent with the goal set in the general plan to integrate commercial land uses such that Highland City's rural resident community character is maintained. And now I need to add, according to the staff report.
In the language,
The decibel levels for type C properties
What
follow
Kelly
what's stated
said.
in the staff report.
That's what Kelly said.
and
Type C properties, nighttime not to exceed 60 decibels.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that, we also talked about the construction from 7 to 10.
yes.
And construction.
Got that, Stephanie?
Perfect.
There's a second.
AM to 10 p.m.
I'll second it.
Motion by Kim, second by
That was
Scott.
Kim's epistle.
Wasn't it beautiful?
And we'll start with Kurt.
Yes.
Tim? No. Brittany?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Okay, that passes 4-1. All right, next item. Funding for additional public works employee. This is where Todd does come forward. So this will be your usual spot on the agenda going forward, as I understand from Nathan.
That is what Nathan has told me,
Yes.
so. Mayor, Council, I don't have a presentation, there's nothing on there, right?
No.
I hope that you all read the council report. There are 3 positions that we are asking to get approved tonight. These 3 positions are the Public Works Assistant Director, the Culinary Water Operator, and a Floating Public Works Operator. The purpose of these positions are noted in the council report, but basically what has happened over the many years that Highland has been a municipality is, over time, it seems like our public works has slowly gotten a little bit smaller, a little bit smaller, a little bit smaller. We currently have, between the engineering department and public works, 16 full-time employees. This is far less than any other municipality out there at that same population and size. And what has happened is, with the growth, we have found ourselves being very, very reactive and not proactive. And we're hopeful, because of all of the recent, there's several reasons for the positions, but one of the reasons is to be more proactive and do the things that we know we should be doing to keep up with the systems that we maintain. But also, the city is continually growing, and we're about to add another 700 units in a very large development. And we feel as staff, we are just drowning. And these 3 positions are going to help us to keep the staff that we currently have from having a nervous breakdown and move on. We need these positions. Do you want me to go into detail on?
Well, I'm just curious what the floater is. I mean, there's a lot of allusions to water here. And
Correct. We've already talked about the culinary position. The floater does not have anything to do with sewage.
I'm watching Scott's face.
Yeah, there was please don't put that in the Tuesday. The floater position, so there are a lot of things that we do in Public Works that need more than 2 or 3 individuals. And every single one of our departments, other than streets, only has 2 current employees. So our sewer department only has 2. Our culinary water only has 2. Our pressurized irrigation only has 2. And what happens is some of these tasks that we're constantly doing, we are robbing the culinary department to go and do loading and shut off of the PI system, or crack sealing for the other departments. And what's happening is we are really falling short of doing all of the maintenance requirements that we need to do day after day, because we're pulling from different departments. This floater position is essentially going to fill in that role of, we need an extra laborer today to do shutoffs in PI, or we need an extra laborer to set meters for our culinary water, or we need an extra hand at the sewer lift stations. So the Public Works Assistant Director, the new position, will direct this floater day by day
where he's needed.
Where he is needed. And there's constant, and I have a list of things that they would be doing, but ultimately, Scott, is we don't have the hands that we need to do some of these tasks. And what's happening is certain departments are really suffering because of that. And we're not able to get out and do the inspections that we're supposed to, because we're pulling certain individuals out of certain departments. So that is the purpose of the floater, is this will be a person that is trained in a lot of different things, and they could be working on parks one day, streets the next, culinary water.
It's wherever they're needed.
Wherever they're needed. And we just felt like calling them a Public Works floater would be better, because they know the position and they know they're going to be doing different things, versus putting them in one department and feeling like the other departments can't use them. So
right, makes sense.
We've put a lot of thought into this and feel like these 3 positions are the 3 positions that will help us be a little bit more proactive in what we do. So,
any other questions for Todd?
I'm good with this if everyone else is. I kind of want to was hoping maybe we could say, if we do this, Todd, will you stay? But we know that won't happen. We know.
A little too late for that.
It's a little too late.
I'll make a motion.
Maybe before we make a motion, because Todd might be stepping down, I think as a city council and as a city, we all want to recognize you, Todd, and tell you thank you for the dedicated hours, the caring you showed to the residents, for the time you spent, many hours, if it was issues at night, any time that was going on, if there were sewer issues, a fire issue, you were always there. So I'm just wanting to say thank you.
Can I just do this for Todd? I think that was, I go to a play for a couple hours, and somebody does a really good job, and we give them standing ovations. 4 years.
I very much appreciate that. I want to say that it has been a pleasure being the city engineer and public works director for 5 years. I appreciate all of the friendships and all of the support we have had in the public works department, and I hope that the relationships don't end tonight. So
they won't. These kind don't.
But don't think it will be easy when you come back if you're presenting something.
So I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
I move that the Highland City Council authorize the funding for the 3 new public works employees subject to the approval of the utility rate study.
I'll second.
Motion by Scott, second by Kim. We'll start with Tim. Brittany?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Okay, that passes unanimously. All right, now for the fun stuff. Tyler, are you the 365 guy?
I am, thank you. If I could ask a quick question here among the mayor and council, by raise of hands, if your cell phone, smartphone, is an Android device, will you raise your hand? And then you can argue for a few moments about which is better, Apple or Android.
Well, Tim and I know. Yeah.
Was this because of me? Because I have problems, this is on me.
No, this is something that is new for everybody, and Tyler will explain.
Thank you. So many of you have probably heard and even used Microsoft 365. Much of the tech industry is moving to subscription-based software. So rather than purchasing the software and you never have to pay anything again other than license renewals, there's a subscription, either an annual or a monthly subscription. This was planned that the city would transition to Microsoft 365 in the coming fiscal year, but our IT folks have been working diligently and have identified a need to do that sooner to make sure that we are able to protect data appropriately. And in the end, it will save the city money rather than the expense of hardware upgrades and whatnot that would otherwise have to take place.
So we're not going to be, right now we host Exchange on one of our servers. That's the mail server. This will migrate it to the cloud, and it's substantially more secure, is my understanding.
Correct.
So all of our emails that we've done, where we have some saved files, they'll transport over to, so everything will still be there?
Correct. It'll be migrated. So the migration will take place this weekend, and email will not be accessible consistently throughout the weekend. So that could be the entirety of Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We're hoping that they can make that a little smoother and shorten that window. But there's a possibility of those 3 days, email being spotty or not available. What you will notice starting on Monday, if you'll connect with us and let us know when you have access to a computer, I'll walk you through getting things set up for your email again with resetting the password. You'll then be able to use those instructions that we've just handed out to you to reconnect to your email on your mobile device, or you're welcome to stop by, or we can arrange another time and we'll be happy to have IT or Kelly set your phone up for you. Since Todd won't be here anymore. Any questions at all?
I have none.
Thank you.
So if help is needed, who do they call? You? Todd.
Todd?
That'll be a real short call.
I'll be your point of contact, and we'll make sure that you get squared away on that.
Okay,
Shoot us a text or something.
okay. All righty. Council.
Let me just ask a quick question, because I was out for a minute. Is this only in relation to our iPhones, not to our computers?
Computers too.
It'll be.
So it's everything?
Yes, all email.
I'll need help.
You betcha. No problem.
I promise.
So in the end, this should be easier and a better interface for you, so.
And what day does this start again? Because I wasn't gone.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
This week?
This weekend.
Oh, gosh.
So Friday, Saturday, and Sunday email will not be available, or maybe spotty during that time. Starting on Monday, then your password will be reset, and we'll help you get connected again. No problem.
Okay. That's okay, I don't look at my email anyway. No, I'm just kidding.
The truth comes out.
No, I do. I've been
I
trying.
know you do. All right, council, anything else? that you would
Yes,
like to bring
I'd
up?
like to ask a question. So we have the ribbon cutting still on the 15th for the East West
Correct.
Corridor. So I've had a lot of questions from the USDC governing board and different things. Have we sent a formal invitation to the governing board up there, because it is going across state land, or former state land?
We did reach out to Thompson and Reese. They could share that.
So we have a governing board meeting in 2 days. If you just have a formal, with the specifics and things, I can just announce it there if you'd like.
Well, they should have received an official invitation.
Okay.
Yes. Please let
Bill
us
Exeter
know.
was asking me just a week ago.
Well, it would have gone to, what's his first name? Thompson?
But he's no longer the.
Who's
Frank
director. It's
Reese.
Frank Reese.
Oh, Frank Reese. Then that's who should have gotten the official invitation.
Okay.
So if they don't know about it at that board meeting, would you let them know, and we will ask
Well, I'd like to know the specifics
Somebody-
too, if I can.
The specifics are that morning of the 15th, we will have a ribbon cutting ceremony, I believe, at 9.
Well, it's
Morning.
the speeches, there'll be speeches from 3 mayors,
Yep.
starting at 9:30. They're supposed to be 3 minutes. Then what we're going to do for the ribbon cutting is, this was a UDOT idea, I think it's a clever idea. They're going to get a big banner like you have at football games, and we're going to get a fire truck, and then everybody can get on that fire truck and drive through the banner.
But hopefully not with the sirens going.
That would violate the noise.
Yeah, that would, yeah.
Well,
They're exempt.
That'd be a real sore spot.
So from that point on, the road will stay closed for anyone who wants to go drive their classic car. There's going to be a classic car thing. Anyone who would like to ride their bikes up and down the trail, up and down the road, it's going to be brand new asphalt. And then we officially open the road at 1 p.m. on May 15th.
So the festivities will end at noon, and that'll give staff time to clean up, and if there's anything on the road that
So
needs to
which
be
end of the
removed.
road are you going to have the?
We're going to have the ribbon cutting ceremony right in the middle, right where the tunnel is.
Right above where the tunnel
Right
is.
above the tunnel.
So the people, where would they park then to walk in? Is it?
So you can park all the way down the back side of Lone Peak, where the trailhead is.
Okay.
And
Where the
then just-
restrooms are there?
Yep.
Yeah, our boneyard's what you call by the restrooms.
Yep.
And then walk over to where that would be just that little dip area?
It's actually just the trail around the restrooms will
Okay.
take you right there.
Yeah. And then mayor, you said there's going to be 3 other mayors. Is there expectation from the city council?
You're all invited to come. You won't have to speak, but you're invited to come and ride on the fire truck and do the horn or whatever it is. It'll be a fun thing. It was a clever idea. That was UDOT's idea to do the banner, right? Or was it yours?
And you're saying if we have an antique,
Banner? No, not mine.
if we have an antique car, we can drive it on the road during that time?
Yep.
So
I don't know if I can get mine working, we'll see.
They're going to have a stationary antique car set up there for a while, and then at the end, they'll drive them away. So our
We'll
events
have-
coordinator is working
We'll
on
have
it.
Corinne send you the details in
Yeah.
an email.
We have we have another meeting this Thursday with UDOT, and we are finalizing the agenda and everything this Thursday. So as soon as we have that finalized, we'll send it to all of the council. But how ironic, I would use that road every day to come to work and go home, and the day we open it up is my last day, so.
Can we have fireworks?
Yes, from your yard.
Well, it basically is in my yard.
I'm not going to be riding a bike, if you were all wondering.
She's running.
You're doing other,
I feel like I'm too old to learn how to ride a bike.
but you're longboarding, right?
What?
You're longboarding.
No, I don't do things with wheels so much.
Rollerblades?
No. I'll bring you a drink.
Oh, but you'll be on a fire truck. That's got wheels.
So I can do that.
All right. The calendar's there. Any other comments from council? All right. Well, I would entertain a motion to
I
adjourn.
move that we hereby adjourn city council.
I'll second it.
Motion by Kurt, second by Scott. All in favor, say aye.
Aye, 10 PM, I won, Kim. Exactly, 10.
That's amazing. I feel like you should go get us ice cream.
Thank you, council. Good meeting.